Day 2 in the Pyrenees in the south of France for the Tour de France as we go on to stage 13 today. This is the Col d'Aubisque. It's the challenge of the day, and this is the finishing line in the religious capital of Lourdes. Let's go first of all earlier today and see what happened at the start this morning from Pau, which is one of the most visited cities on the route of the Tour de France alongside Bordeaux and Paris. Thomas Voeckler was keeping his yellow jersey.
Yeah, well, he kept it with sheer defiance yesterday, and I think he's going to try and keep hold of it again today when we go even further into the Pyrenees. As soon as the neutralised flag was waved by the man Christian Prudhomme, the attacks came thick and fast.
Yes, we did get a little breakaway away, but they've been swept up, and unusually at the moment the peloton have just all regrouped. But this was a sad sight, as we saw in our pre-show. The abandon of Andreas Kloden on terrific form, but he couldn't beat off all of the crashes, compounded with yet another crash yesterday. He's now the 4th member of Team Radio Shack to abandon the Tour. They only have 5 riders left.
Yeah, 2 of those riders, Levi Leipheimer and Haimar Zubeldia, up in the top 15 overall.
This is the first climb of the day, the Côte du Coucheron, after 43 kilometres, and we got to know him quite well yesterday, Jelle van den Dert. Well, today he's got himself 2 points in the King of the Mountains here, chased over there by Nicky Terpstra of Quick-Step. Field all together for that sprint, and it's a beautiful day today as we leave behind us for the moment the mountains, but we're heading back into them shortly. 72 degrees and mostly sunny is the forecast. All of these lovely pictures coming to you from France in high definition. So we're all set now, Paul, as the race itself did have that breakaway. They chased it very hard. They're running ahead of schedule today as the riders now are starting to splinter again from the field.
I just caught a quick glimpse there of an FDJ rider shooting off the front end of the pack, and that was once again Jeremy Waugh, a man who was extremely aggressive yesterday. FDJ, Phil, they never seem to miss a breakaway.
Well, let's see if we can show you pictures now of Jeremy Waugh as we pick up the live action, and there he is. He's just slipped away from the front of the peloton. He is the most regular man in all of the breaks since this race started on the Vendée. He spent more kilometres out front than any other rider in the Tour. And incidentally, yesterday when he won the climb of the Col de Tourmalet by catching Geraint Thomas just before the top, the last time he went over the Tourmalet, he'd crossed it in 2nd place, so at least he went one better there.
No, certainly, and pocketed himself €5,000 on that occasion, around about $8,000. He's now trying to get himself settled in. The race, Phil, surprisingly enough, has already split up quite dramatically, even over a 3rd category climb, the Côte de Coucheron, where we saw Van den Dert go over in 1st place, and this is only after 44 kilometres covered, and there are riders already 3 and 4 minutes behind the main field.
Which is a little bit of a worry, because Lars Boom is one of those riders now racing 4 minutes off the back of the peloton. He knows a real danger there. He will be eliminated today. Also dropped is the American sprinter Tyler Farrar, who has also gone off, and we hope that he gets back on as we bridge now towards the sprint of the day, and then of course we face up to the massive climb of the Col d'Aubisque.
Well, we've been talking about him a lot, riding at the back end of the main field. Today, David Moncoutier has decided this could very well be the day for him, and he's a rider in the red and white jersey trying to find the breakaway, but the main field are not really too far behind them.
Well, they are racing at such a high speed. We are, well, the first hour, the average speed, and believe this, a massive 49 kilometres an hour. That's in excess of 30 miles an hour for the opening hour. These boys are in a real hurry to get onto the slopes of the Col d'Aubisque today.
Well, I thought today might have been a slightly easier day, sandwiched in between the 2 big Pyrenean stages, but when you hit a mountain stage at speeds like this, you're going to get a little bit of a change made. Rojas, very clever too, looking for a move, Phil, because he's looking to try and get to the next sprint point of the day in the lead, to try and get himself a few points to get back into the green jersey points competition. I think Rojas and, of course, Mark Cavendish, they're very concerned today about Philippe Gilbert.
Yes, well, there's a number of different tactics at play now today, because, as Paul has said, a lot of riders will try to attack and get clear because they believe a breakaway will succeed. The peloton are chasing them because they don't want them to get away. Cavendish in that green points jersey would like this race to hold together until they have the sprint 70 kilometres into the race, which is only 18 kilometres ahead on the road. Then once that's done, the sprinters will take time out and will attack the slopes of the Col d'Aubisque. So I think this high speed will continue until we hit that climb.
I think you're quite right, and amazing to see when you think of that average speed, Phil, at 49 kilometres now, just over 30 miles an hour.
Yep.
That includes the third category climb we went over, so it just gives you an idea how hard these men are racing.
Well, it's highlighted some tired bodies, that's for sure. Lars Bohm is a very big surprise being dropped on that climb. The last time we saw him is 3.5 minutes behind going over the top of that climb.
Another sprinter caught out in that is William Bonnet, the rider from FDJ. He's gone out of the back of the group too.
Deris Galimzhanov, the Russian sprinter who's been up there in the sprints in the first week. He was eliminated yesterday. He finished almost an hour after Sanchez crossed the finishing line, so that was too far behind to continue. The guillotine had fallen, and so he was sent packing this morning. There's the world champion at the back with those rainbow colours as world champion, Torhushov. He's had 7 yellow jerseys in the opening week of the Tour de France. He fought very well to keep the lead for all that time. He's now in the ranks, though, looking to try and support his team, Garmin Cervelo.
The Sky Rider at the back there in the black and white jersey and all the bandages keeping himself together is Juan Antonio Fletcher. He's still recovering, whereas Johnny Hoogerland, Phil, he seems to recover very quickly from his accident.
Yeah, Hoogerland says he has actually heard from the driver that knocked him off, who I think he's apologised, but they didn't say his name, I believe. Is that right, Paul?
He sent a letter of apology, actually, to Hoogerland, but he just signed it to Andre. But Juan Antonio Fletcher, now having seen that there has been some contact, said he would like to meet him.
Right. Okay, well, the race itself now is under pressure again today, and there's a lot of riders trying to manipulate a move here. The peloton, as you can see, absolutely charging on. This is a big breakaway which is getting themselves all together. Carlos Barredo, number 42 here, has attacked a number of times today. He's anxious to get into the move, but he is a danger man. He's quite well up.
Well, so too is Philippe Gilbert in the National Champions jersey there. He's looking for the breakaway very early on. He's thinking first of all at the sprint point at Biel, which comes after 82 kilometres, and I think he's also thinking about trying to survive over the Col de l'Aubis, because a lot of people have got him down as their favourites this afternoon.
Well, you know, that breakaway is being fought back hard by the peloton. Gilbert is just off the front of that second group just now, and his black top to his jersey, champion of Belgium. This is David Moncoutier setting the pace at the front, looking to see who's going to join him. This is a typical move by him today. But the peloton is thundering around that corner. If only we could see the back of the race right now, I think we would see a lot of riders just hanging on in there.
Yeah, it was not an easy day yesterday. I have to take my hat off to Thomas Vogel. He did a phenomenal job. He himself actually felt that it was going to be the end of the yellow jersey for him, but as you've said on so many occasions, that yellow jersey leading a race like the Tour de France, it really changes a rider, and the spirit and the amount of pain that you can actually accept to keep in the yellow jersey.
Well, let's see, we've got a Rabobank rider here, and this looks to me as though it might be Lars Bohm himself. So we've gone right to the back of the race here. The team car is probably going to give him a few drinks, a little bit of encouragement, then it will have to leave him and go back up to the race. That means you're on your own, boy.
And that's the difficult thing when you've been in a breakaway, as he was a couple of days ago, and you dig very deep into your reserves somewhere down the line, a little bit further on in the Tour de France. You have to pay, and today is not the right day for him to be paying that debt, and in fact he may well find himself quite eliminated at the end of the race. Torhushov has now joined that small breakaway, but they've only got themselves about a 10-second advantage. I think it's all going to come back together.
I agree. That's Alessandro Patacchi in third place as well in his pink jersey, the sprinter from Italy. I think there's too many names getting up here that will disturb Mark Cavendish when he's thinking of the green jersey, which is now not too far away. It comes today at 70 kilometres into the race, so we've done 56 so far.
Well, it's having a fair amount of effect on the riders in the back end of the peloton this afternoon, who are not giving very much chance at all for an easy ride to the slopes of the Col de l'Aubis. So a very dramatic climb. It's nice to see that the clouds are fairly high this afternoon, because it really is a beautiful climb, the Col de l'Aubis. If you want to look at it from the helicopter, maybe not ride up it at 35 kilometres an hour.
No, and the way they're racing towards it, there's going to be a major explosion in this peloton as soon as they hit that climb. There are going to be a lot of tired men. But it looks as though for the moment they are coming together. They're scurrying up the outside is Juan Antonio Fletcher with all his bandages on from that crash he had when he was knocked off by the car. All right, well, we'll take our first break as we rejoin the Tour de France. This is a sad sight now. The second man to retire today, Lars Bohm of Holland, who we've seen up in the breakaways for the last week, is out of the Tour de France. These are live pictures, and he is just abandoning.
Well, that's a sad day for Lars Boom. He was very aggressive over the first week. We saw him in breakaways, but the Tour de France is an extremely special event, and that's one thing I think maybe why we didn't have such a big showdown yesterday, Phil, because these riders, they're all very scared about the final week of the race, especially riders like Alberto Contador, who this year has already participated in the Giro d'Italia.
Yes, Lars Boom is a quality bike rider, believe me, and it's his second Tour de France. He finished last year 130th in his first attempt on the Tour. The peloton, as you can see, has got themselves a much more steady rhythm now. They're heading up towards the climb of the Côte de Bel Air, and the breakaway of 10 riders has just gone away. In it is David Moncoutier, Martin Jangelai, Thor Hushoff, the world champion, Dmitry Fofanov, Edvald Boysen-Hagen of the Sky team. He'll be a good climber and a possible stage winner if it stays away. Jerome Pino, Jeremy Roy, Alessandro Petacchi, Lars Bak, Gusev is in there as well.
Well, Thor Hushoff is in here because he's thinking about getting himself some points a little bit further up the road when we get to the 82nd kilometre at Biel, because that's where today's sprint point is. Hushoff is in 5th place overall in the green jersey race with 163 points, and 20 points available out on the course would start to push him right back up amongst the leaders.
It might well turn the points competition off for Mark Cavendish, the leader in the green jersey today, because the top 15 riders to cross the line get points, and the first man gets 20, and with 10 men away, there's not much points left back in that peloton, but we will see. So we've got Jangelai, Hushoff, Fofanov, Hagen, Pino, Roy, Moncoutier, Petacchi and Bak. Let's have a look, first of all, the overall standings in the King of the Mountains. They're just starting the 4th category climb of the Côte de Bel Air. Sanchez won his first points yesterday, and there were double points at the finishing line at Les Ardennes, 40 points. That's all he's got in one climb, and it's given him the polka dot jersey overall. And Van den Dert is in 2nd place, consolidated today, because he got a point on there. He's got 2 points rather on the first climb of the day. Now the peloton are on the lower slopes of the Côte de Bel Air just now. It's only 4th category. And sadly, Paul, while we've been away, we've just heard of our 3rd abandon of the day, and it is one of the Russian riders, Vladimir Ishashev of the Katusha team. That team is now down to 5 riders as well.
Well, I think it's over the next couple of days we'll start to see 1 or 2 riders pull out of this race. Once you start to get into the mountains, it's very difficult to recover. And I think the main field are now all of a sudden quite satisfied they've got that breakaway, and it's the size of breakaway that could actually survive on a day like today, because having 10 riders in there and strong riders, solid Tour riders. I'm looking at guys like Jerome Pino, Phil, who's ridden 10 times in the Tour de France. He knows what to look for in a breakaway like this, and I think it suits Team Europcar quite well.
At the moment, it's Vladimir Gusev who's best placed man overall in that breakaway. He's looking for 11 minutes and 14 seconds to take the yellow jersey. At the moment, he's reclaimed 3 minutes and 48. That's the gap. We've just been over 4 minutes now. So we won't worry too much about them staying away, but they'll keep an eye on that just in case. Obviously, the climb of the Col d'Aubisque is still ahead. This is a very, very small hors d'oeuvre. It's a kilometre in length. We're coming up towards the summit. None of these riders have an interest in the King of the Mountains. There's a small prize, or as always, at the top. And it looks as though it's the Française des Jeux rider, Jeremy Roy. Well, he does have an interest in the King of the Mountains. He's got himself 1 point.
Plus, don't forget, he was the man who led over the Col de Tourmalet, so he's got 20 points in his back pocket, and he'll be thinking further down the road. Team Europcar now have decided now's enough is enough as far as they're concerned. They've come at a quiet section while they've allowed everybody to just have a natural break at the side of the road. Now they're adopting the position they adopted yesterday at the business end of the peloton this afternoon. It's their job in the office today to make sure that breakaway doesn't get too far off the front.
That's right, just keep an eye on it. These are the Leopard Trek boys. They really launched an assault yesterday. Fast tempo riding with the team to try and see just how good Alberto Contador was. They destroyed most of the team, but they got a result with Frank Schleck crossing the line in 3rd place and moving up into 2nd place overall. Plenty of action within. This is Samuel Sanchez, the leader in the King of the Mountains. That's unlikely to change today. There's only 20 points at the top of the Aubisque, and he's got himself 40 points, so he's happy with that.
Yeah, but I think what yesterday did too, Phil, it told us another couple of names who could be challengers in the Tour de France this year. Ivan Basso, the Italian rider, being one of those. And, of course, Alberto Contador showing a little bit of a frailty. Damiano Cunego did a great ride. He moved himself up into the standing, into 6th place. And of course, we can't ignore the ride by Tommy Danielson, who now is proving to be the leader of Team Garmin-Cervelo.
No, Tommy Downs had a wonderful day yesterday. He really did. And we hear that Christian van der Velde, the other strong man, and climbs well, who's finished 4th on the previous Tour de France, is now going to look after Tommy D and see if he can guide him safely to see him finish in a high position in Paris. Interested to see an HTC high road man in the breakaway because they're normally all at the back looking after Cavendish for the sprint. And he's just gone through our pictures. The last man on the back of this break, that's Lars Bak, who does all the early pacemaking usually. Thor Hushovd having a word here with Lars. They're both Scandinavians, of course. Lars is Danish. Thor is Norwegian. And the Katusha rider here is Vladimir Gusev, just in front, best placed in the breakaway, but he's lost a teammate today. That team now has lost Pavel Brut. Yesterday, their sprinter, Galimzhinov, was eliminated on time, and Kolobnev was thrown out for a positive drugs test. So now there's 4 guys gone from that.
Well, just looking at the back here. Yeah, he's having some treatment from the doctor. A lot of people expected big things from him this afternoon, but when you've got 33 stitches in your legs, it's not very easy to recover in a race like the Tour de France. But I think he's recovered a lot of pride and also a lot of support along the roads of France. And when he had the polka dot jersey on his shoulders, Phil, everybody recognised him. I'm not sure that they will recognise him in his jersey there of a Vacances Soleil.
No, he's back in his team colours now, having seen his King of the Mountains polka dots passed over to Samuel Sanchez. But he's still a big part to play in the Tour de France, I think, Johnny Hoogland, the Dutchman. And now we're looking at a more regular Tour stage today. The teammates of the yellow jersey all on the front there, the Europcar riders, for Thomas Voigtler, who's in the yellow. And behind him, he's got all the might of the Leopard Trek team of Andy and Frank Schleck. And they'll just sit behind him. I'm sure they'll launch some sort of an assault on the Col de Bisque again to test is Alberto Contador really struggling in these opening days in the mountains, and they want to know the answer. And Cadel Evans seems to be up for the fight at the moment. That's the other Australian favourite. But I do feel after yesterday, you know, we have 3 other names we must talk about. Damiano Cunego, Samuel Sanchez, who won the stage, and also Ivan Basso, because they had a good day out yesterday up the road to Les Ardennes. Beautiful roads today, and at the moment, a lovely warm summer's day. Well, Europcar doing the job that they have to do now. That's look after the Queen Bee, who is in yellow, right down the end of this line. They've done the majority of the work, virtually 100% of the pacemaking. Now, we did hear that Tyler Farrar, the American, had dropped off fairly early on. I've got a feeling he may have struggled his way back to the break. If not, he could be in trouble today, because Lars Bohm was dropped and has abandoned the race. We've got 3 riders out today, if you're just joining us. Also out is Andreas Kloden, another favourite for Radio Shack, who have lost 3 of the 4 potential leaders from the team with crashes now.
And 1 or 2 riders were struggling at the back end of the peloton as they went over that first 3rd category climb of the day. Mark Cavendish managed to get himself back in, so I'd expect to see the American Tyler Farrar in there as well.
It's a little trip through the cars. We catch up with the leaders. Car 1 you saw on the right, that's the chief referee, a race director. He's up behind the leaders today. This breakaway of 10 got away, 92 kilometres out. We've got 4 riders in this breakaway who have had stage wins. Thor Hushovd's got the most. He had 8 stage wins in history. Pataki, the sprinters, had 6. Moncoutier 2. And Boysenhagen, well, we've probably seen that one this week because he won a stage earlier on in this Tour de France. He's looking for his 2nd if this group stays away. And it's going to be a good race when we get to that climb. We're not that far away from the start of it. But first of all, we've got the sprint, and with 10 riders in the breakaway, Mark Cavendish only has to beat a couple of riders back in the bunch because there's only 15 places awarded for the Green Points competition.
Yeah, for Mark Cavendish, I suppose the big advantage for him with the breakaway like this today, Phil, is on a mountain stage, and a high mountain stage like this, there are less points available on the finishing line. There are 45 points available for the first rider to cross the line on the flat stages, 35 on the average mountains, and only 30 points available on the high mountain stages. So I suppose Mark Cavendish can breathe a slight sigh of relief, although he's still got to drag his body over the mountains before he sprints again into Montpellier.
Yes, and look what happened to the Russian sprinter yesterday, Galimzhinov. he was eliminated yesterday by just under an hour behind when he came to the top of Luzardi Den, and the axe had fallen because you're eliminated on a percentage of the time of the winner. Number 204 there is Johnny Hoogland, made famous by his early aggression and then the aggression of a media motor car when he was knocked off his bike. Now he is out of the lead in the King of the Mountains, but very much still in the Tour de France, despite his 33 stitches.
Well, ticking by the kilometres now before we get to that sprint point. I wouldn't be surprised to see a nice battle between Alessandro Petacchi and Thor Hushovd.
Yeah, it's a very good point. There's Petacchi just passing through our pictures there. You don't often see sprinters in breakaways, so they're anticipating this breakaway will succeed. That's why they've gone in it. The only way to beat Mark Cavendish is to get away from him, although I don't think Mark will be in the action with the climb like the Orbisque coming his way. They're just entering the feeding station. I don't think anybody else will mix up in this. I don't think, for example, Boyson Hagen will try on the Sky team because he's not very high up in the points competition, although he's had a win, and he is third place here at the moment. Moncoutier sits fourth in red. Just watching here, that is the sprint point coming up now, and it looks as though Petacchi is getting ready to sprint here.
Well, no sprint.
I can't believe that. They've gone through the sprint. I thought it mustn't have been the sprint point because nobody bothered.
I'm a bit shocked there, Phil. There were 20 points available for the first rider to cross that sprint point, but obviously these guys are thinking about they're facing up in 12 kilometres time to the start of the Col de l'Aubisque.
Well, it can only be. They want to go the distance and win the race. It won't be the same when we get down to the finish in Lourdes. But Boyson Hagen took a rather easy 15-20 points he gets for that today. And that might help him in the longer term. You never know how this competition turns around. Well, I'm sure the peloton itself will do something better with Cavendish. Anyway, let's not forget to log on to NBCSports.com/podium. Join the Tour de France, do it every day. A chance to win a trip for two to next year's Tour, a Cervelo S5 bike, a clean bottle and a Giro helmet. Today's code word you need when you log in is Feed Zone. 4:39. Nobody bothered with the sprint, so Boyson Hagen took it almost by default. He also won a hatful of points when he won that stage the other day, so he is in the competition.
Well, there's only 5 points available, Phil, for the first rider to cross the line, but I tell you what, they're taking them very seriously because Movistar are going to make the lead out for just 11th place. There are points available from 11th to 15th, 1 point available for 15th place, and this competition can be won by a single point when it comes down to Paris, so I'm sure that Mark Cavendish is going to be very attentive and keep his close eye on JJ Rojas.
Well, 18 points separates Rojas from the green jersey being worn today by Mark Cavendish. So 5, we're doing very nicely, edging a bit closer because we're into difficult stages for the sprinters. They've got to hang on in there till this sprint point is out the way before they drop off the pack as we go up the mountain. Third is Mark Cavendish, and judging by the fact he's all being set up here for the sprint, he's going to take them on today.
Well, he is, but right on his wheel is the Spanish champion, JJ Rojas. Jose Joaquim Rojas. In front of Mark Cavendish is Mark Renshaw, and then in front of him is Matty Goss, and then it's Bernie Eisel. It's the old train of HTC, but the tempo is really being lifted by the riders from Movistar currently.
Keeping out of trouble here is Andy Schleck. Not interested. Now Philippe Gilbert will go for it. He will certainly want it, and it looks so Andre Greipel is going to lead out Philippe Gilbert as best he can. He's looking for him on the blind side, Andre. There he is. And now if he can launch him to the line, he's going to rip off very early, chased by Rojas. And where's the green jersey? Still on the lead-out train. He's still sitting in the back wagon. Now, can he come from the back, or is it not going to happen here now? Gilbert has gone very, very early for this, and the gap has opened. That's a good move.
It's a good move, but he's gone much too far out from the line because HTC are very clever when it comes to a lead out like this, and slowly they've pegged him out and put him into his place. It looks like Bernie Eisel, Matty Goss, still Mark Renshaw. Fourth position there is Mark Cavendish, and they've gone right off the front end of the main field. It's going to be a big challenge between Rojas, Cavendish, and it looks like it's Sebastian I've forgotten his name now. The sprint, Sebastian Bonnet.
Yes, well, I don't know why Gilbert went too early, but he's the opportunist sprinter, and he went far too soon, about 1,500 metres out. This should be a formality for Mark now. It's only 5 points, but every little helps here when it goes in the bank. and he won't be worried about those riders up front. They're not near him in the points competition. There are points available, of course, at the finishing line. He's got the best sprinter up against him in second place in the competition following. He knows it now. He's looked over to see who's sitting on his back wheel. The final lead out, the smooth pedalling Marc Renshaw. Now the jumpers come early. I think that was a good move by Rojas. He had to go first. Now he's got Cavendish up against the edge, and it's a double header here. Now Cavendish wants this one. Oh! Well, I don't think there's any ground for complaints. Cavendish moved a bit there. I'm not sure he got that either.
Well, he didn't get it at all, but he was complaining a fraction because he thinks that Rojas actually closed the door on him a fraction there, but it was fairly wide. He got caught out by the jump of Rojas.
That was the only way to do it. Take your hats off to the Spanish rider there. I don't think there's any grounds for complaints there, quite honestly. He was out-jumped, out-thought, and out-manoeuvred.
No, it was the right time, and that was the way to beat Mark Cavendish, catch him by surprise. Cavendish waiting, playing a very long waiting game. You can see Rojas moved across his line a fraction, but there was still plenty of room for Cavendish to come by if he could.
Well, the judges watch the same pictures as we do. We'll see if they do anything overnight. But at the moment, we'll wait and see. He's not happy. He's conceded possibly 2 points of his lead. There was 18 difference between them. He might now have 16, but it's not going to be too serious, that one.
He doesn't like it when he gets beaten, does he?
Oh, I can't blame him. He's a great sprinter. There's the actual photo finish for you.
Well, if there's no problem about first place, but what's more important, Phil, is second place, because it was very close between him and the other rider who's coming up there from Movistar, and that would have been Ventoso.
Cavendish won his appeal last time that happened, and he says there was justice in the world. Well, we'll see if there's anything happened. At the moment, there's no doubt who won. There was no sprint to the front. The big bulk of the points going to Boysenhagen.
Yeah, but Cavendish has got to keep tagging away at those intermediate points over the next couple of days. Last back, Pinot was 10th, Rojas 11th, and Cavendish 12th. So he just got across Ventoso in the sprint for the line, and Marc Renshaw rounding out the top 15.
So it's only 1 point gained by Rojas, so his advantage is now, or disadvantage to Cavendish, is 17.
But he's also increased his lead once again over Philippe Gilbert. Gilbert could quite possibly get himself over the big mountain today and get bigger points on the finish line.
So the leaders, I think, must be about to see the big red spotted board here, which will tell them it's 16.4 kilometers to the summit of the Col d'Aubisque. We're starting on these very narrow roads in the town of Laron, and then they'll climb up the Aubisque. We should see wonderful pictures today because the conditions are good and the top doesn't appear to be shrouded in mist, as so often the Pyrenean climbs are.
Yeah, this is an extremely long climb. It's the length of the climber that makes it an all category, and outside categorized climbs. The way the climbs are categorized, they go for all category, which is the most difficult, first and second category, which are a little easier, and then of course the ones we have in the early part of the Tour de France at third and fourth category, which this year have a lot less points than they used to, because they're trying to turn the King of the Mountains competition back into a competition for the climbers of the high mountain peaks.
Seems to be working as well. Sanchez, who won yesterday, got 40 points for winning on top of a mountain. That put him straight into the lead in the King of the Mountains. He's not in the breakaway, of course. He's back in the main field, but I think we might see something on him again today. These are the 10 riders who got away with 92 kilometers left to race of the 152 today. So with 60 kilometers to go, they got clear. Now, when they get to the top, they'll have only 40 kilometers to race to the finish.
Yeah, and sadly enough, Phil, one of those climbs which I would remember that I detested, because as you descend from the Col de l'Aubisque, you actually think you're going to start plummeting down towards the valley floor, but then halfway down, you actually have to start climbing back up again to go over the top of the Col de Soulor. And although it's not a categorized climb, it is a bit of a leg breaker.
It used to be a categorized climb. I think they gave it a second category tag from the side when we come over a different angle, perhaps. 6 minutes they've got as they start the climb of the Col d'Aubisque.
And the climb itself over the first 4 or 5 kilometers is reasonably steady at around about 4 to 6% the average gradient. But once we get to the 7th kilometer of the climb, it kicks into 8% to 10%. And then from there all the way up to the summit is between 8 and 9%. So it's a real difficult climb. You've got a good 10 kilometers at 8%.
They've been riding just over 2 hours at the moment, as then they covered 50 kilometers almost in those 2 hours. Now they're starting the climb, and it is an all-category climb. It is 16.4 kilometers long before they see the finishing banner at the top. big test, this, but if these boys have got a couple of minutes in hand at the top, I think they might stay away to the end today. At the moment, Thor Hushovd is climbing alone on the Col de Bisque. A little bit of a reaction here from Mikel Delage, who's trying, I don't know, he's dropping off the back of the pack here. He doesn't look too good. I think he's been dropped.
There's a lot of riders. The race didn't actually attack the main field as much as I thought it was. We're actually looking at Mikel Delage, and he's obviously, I would expect to see him going backwards.
Now, we'll get pictures of Thor Hushovd shortly, but he's gone alone at the moment, and, you know, he's the sort of man who gets over the top by himself. He'll time trial to the finish and win the day.
Well, in fact, it looks as if Mikel Delage has jumped off the front end of the peloton. A number of riders have seen this as an opportunity. They can see the tactic which we're getting from Team Europcar. They're setting a tempo, which is a tempo comfortable for Thomas Voeckler, and they are allowing small groups of riders, this second group of riders, to get clear off the front end of the pack.
Well, they've gone onto the mountain just inside 6 minutes behind those 10 leaders, and we've gone up to the leader now. This is Thor Hushovd, who made that jump from the rear of the 10. There are a few riders trying to put matters to right. I think the climbers are trying to get back up to him here at the moment, which is only Moncoutier.
Well, the first man trying to get across is Jeremy Watt, number 138, and what he's thinking about is points at the top of this climb. It's an outside categorized climb, the Col de l'Aubisque. There are a big number of points available, 20 points available for him if he can get over the top still at the front of the race. And amazing to see how he recovered overnight, because he and Geraint Thomas yesterday were in a very long breakaway over the Col de Tourmalet and then halfway up the Col of the Luzardiden.
Well, if Jeremy Roy was to win the climb, he would be the next leader in the King of the Mountains. He needs the 20 points. It would put him 4 points ahead. And there's those vultures we were telling you about. And these really are wild now as we fly around the Col d'Aubisque. Well done to the helicopter who's pulled them out of the sky. As Thor Hushovd continues now setting tempo. He's going to be joined by Jeremy Roy, who's our most aggressive rider of the Tour so far. This is the chase group trying to get clear of the peloton, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, this is Maxime Bouet, who's jumped away from the peloton, and he's there joined by Bauke Mollema, who at the start of the race looked like he was in a little bit of difficulty. But Team Rabobank now, Phil, I think have got to try and look for the breakaways.
Yeah. Yes, Team Rabobank at the moment admitted now with Robert Gesink, who lost 17 minutes yesterday. He was the man for the win. He's never recovering from an early crash. When I say lost him from the win, he's still in the race. But now they've readdressed their strategy, and they said they're looking for stage wins. And so that looks like Bauke Mollema has been asked to get off the front, see if he can catch these boys who are up the road at the moment. 5:27, Jeremy Roy, who was in a similar situation on the Col de Tourmalet yesterday, but he was chasing Geraint Thomas of Team Sky. He caught him just before the top, and he won the climb. And if he wins this one, then he will be the new leader in the King of the Mountains, because there's no points back in the main field on this climb today.
Well, he's got a pretty good chance of pulling himself back to Thor Hushovd, because he climbed exceptionally well yesterday. He's not normally regarded as a good climber, but once you get into a situation like this in the race, when you're not subject to the tempo of the big leaders, the guys like Thomas Voeckler, guys like the Schleck brothers, you can get into your own rhythm. And I think once he gets to about the 7th or 8th kilometre of this climb, when it starts to get a bit steeper, the advantage of the climbing will tilt across to Jeremy Roy rather than Thor Hushovd.
It's a nice fast pedaling cadence here of Thor Hushovd, concentrating on just holding his rhythm. At the moment, the hill is not that steep. It breaks out into a more barren atmosphere towards the summit. Now he's looking over his shoulder here to see if anybody's trying to come up to him just now. And there's one rider in the distance there. The other two.
Yep, I think originally it was David Moncoutier, but it looks as if it's a different coloured jersey now. They're a little bit up further off the back. Jeremy Roy wants to try and make the contact with Thor Hushovd, I think, so he'll continue to move across this gap on his own until he can see the world champion.
Well, that breakaway of 10 I thought would have spent a little bit more time together, but for some reason Hushovd wanted to break it up straight away. I'm not too sure what the tactic is there, but he's gone and riding sensibly up to his side here. He's not rushing at him, he's just keeping his own tempo. And now he seems to have caught. So we've got two leaders now on the climb, Hushovd of Norway and Jeremy Roy of France. And I think we might swell to about 4, because those other two are coming up soon.
Well, on a breakaway like this, a man like Thor Hushovd from Garmin-Cervelo, he would see this as an opportunity to get himself into a breakaway on a day when he probably thinks that the breakaway could survive. I think this was a little bit of a free hand for the world champion to get into a breakaway on a mountain stage.
There we are, both together at the front as these riders here will continue their push on as well.
Well, these riders just off the front end of the peloton, as you can see, they're riders who jumped away just a little earlier on.
Yeah, three there they are, Mollema, Bouet and Delage. Delage was the one that made the move. Bouet joined him, and then Bauke Mollema had a very, very good Tour of Switzerland just before. He was unlucky in the Tour of Switzerland. He lost a very high overall finish because of a mechanical problem when the race was under pressure and he couldn't catch up again. It was really sad. 53 kilometres to go, which means we've got about 11 kilometres, 11.5 kilometres still to climb here to the summit. Well, this is Moncoutier with Boysenhagen.
Just about with Boysenhagen.
Yeah.
Boysenhagen trying to get onto the wheel of Moncoutier. Moncoutier's won 2 stages in the Tour de France, and one of those was on Bastille Day. In fact, he was the last French rider to win on Bastille Day, and that was back in 2005. He is a very enigmatic professional bike rider, Phil. He cannot ride in the front end of the pack. He has to ride sitting right on the tail, and as riders get dropped one by one, he just moves himself around them. He has a fear of riding in the big bunch.
Well, there's no big bunch now. They've made sure of that. At least Thor Hushovd has. A Belgian flag on the left of the road there. These two will continue to work together. Those other two might get across. It depends how these run. Boysenhagen had the greatest day of his professional career when we raced into Ligier last week. Mum and Dad were in the following cars watching him, I believe, and he won the stage. So it was a perfect day out for the family Boysenhagen from Norway. Now, lovely twists and turns. This is a really nice climb, and very often it's been shrouded in mist. Visibility's been awful, but not so today. Jem dropped as we went through a little cover over the road for the avalanche hitting the cars, and it looks as though he's now being passed here by David Moncoutier, who's got rid of Boysenhagen, which is interesting. So Thor has now settled in. He started the move, but Jeremy Watt came up to him and has left him. And now Moncoutier, 2 Frenchmen, and haven't won a stage yet, the French, now chasing one up the mountain. Now, it would spoil a perfect day for Jeremy Watt if he was to be caught by Moncoutier and lost the top, because that means he wouldn't be in the polka dot jersey tomorrow. Well, David Moncoutier never ceases to surprise me, Paul. He's such an up-and-down rider. He rides the whole Tour, last man in the peloton. Then he chooses his day and off he goes. And right now he's in process of heading up towards Jeremy Watt. From now on, and they've got to conserve, and it looks as though that's what Michael Delage agrees with us there, Paul. He's dropped back from that leading group and he's now come back into the field. He was the man who started the move, but he found it got a bit too hot for him out there. So he's dropped back into the pack. All of the front runners of green jerseys of Thomas Voeckler, their Team Europe car, and they're just keeping their man safe and sound. They'll be happy with this pace. That's for sure. Let's just look down. There's Voeckler in the centre of the peloton there. I don't even see the polka dot jersey of Samuel Sanchez. Now that is a well-dressed man, isn't it? Is he real or isn't he real? There's a question. We'll continue on the Col de Beast. See you in a minute. Hushovd, the world champion, is in 3rd. The rest of this 10-man breakaway, according to the computer, are climbing in a bunch of 7, but we've never seen them since the climb started. If Hushovd can get together with Moncoutier and Jeremy Watt, then I think they're going to go to the finish. 1 kilometre to go. The best moment of this rider's life for sure. And if anybody has earned a polka dot jersey, Paul, it is this guy. Over 500 kilometres he's been in front of the 2,000 we've ridden in the Tour de France since we left Vendée.
Both he and his team have been the aggressive team of the Tour de France so far. They've been in every breakaway move in any which way you want to form it. But yesterday was a phenomenal day in the mountains by that man, Jeremy Watt. He forced his way across the gap to catch up with Geraint Thomas, the Welshman, and the 2 of those riders went over the top of the Tourmalet, the high spot of the mountains here, in 1st and 2nd place. I would expect to see Moncoutier summit in 2nd position, and if he uses his downhill abilities, he should be able to catch Jeremy Watt on the descent. At around about 2 minutes, Thor Hushovd is not that far behind because he's a slightly heavier rider with carrying 82 kilos compared to these other riders, and he could use that to his advantage on the descent. Only 50,000 orange T-shirts were distributed yesterday by Euskaltel Euskadi in support of their riders, and unfortunately for them, they got the victory.
It worked for Samuel Sanchez. Into the mist at the top now, as we're over 5,000 feet here. There is the banner, and that gives this man, Jeremy Roy, his first ever leader's jersey, and he's in his 4th Tour de France. He'll go 5 points ahead in that competition now, as he now begins the descent. 42 kilometers to the finish in Lourdes, where it is still a beautiful day. He'll be out of that cloud very, very quickly. Second over the top will come David Moncoutier. Third over the top will be the world champion, and nobody would have reckoned he'd have been third of a mountain in Thor Hushovd. And if those two can get up to Jeremy Roy, I don't think we'll see the race again today.
Now he was about to get picked up by the front end of the breakaway. In fact, there are only points available for the first 6 riders to cross the top of the outside categorized climb.
Yes, that's right. New rules again changed, so that's why that Samuel Sanchez back in the main field. There's more than 6 riders ahead of that peloton at the moment. Second place for David Moncoutier. 8 minutes and 2 seconds the gap now. I think these boys can settle in for the finish. There's nobody going to catch them. There's the peloton. Alberto Contador out of the saddle with his yellow glasses. Just behind him, having a drink there, is the top American cyclist Tommy Danielson. Had a great day yesterday. Basso is number 91. On the far side is Frank Schleck. In front of him is his brother Andy. They're all just following wheels here. Peter Velitz nearest camera, centre white.
Peter Velitz, 14th overall. Tony Martin, also the rider from HTC, having a slightly better day. There has been no challenge at all to the overall lead of Thomas Voeckler here this afternoon, and that's not really a major surprise to me. This is, though, looking at the world champion Thor Hushovd, it makes me feel good to see a man who normally rides at the back end of the races in these mountain stages going to go over the top of this climb in 3rd place. What's important, Phil, is the time gap that he has and whether or not he can make the junction on the descent.
Yeah. Yes, that's the thing. He's got to take risks on the descent, that's for sure. We've had warning that around the area of the Col de Soulor we go into a tunnel. As Hushovd goes over in 3rd place now, he'll grab a newspaper or a piece of plastic to keep the wind out of the chiller as he starts the descent. And they've got to take it careful down here, but they need to keep that time gap of 8 minutes on the peloton, because they know now this is their stage for the taking. With only 26 miles left to race and virtually all of it downhill. We hardly go up, we just continue to descend, descend, descend. Little hiccup at the Col de Soulor, which we won't be too long in reaching on the way down here. There's a couple of ways over the Col de Soulor, and normally when we come over it from the side, it's a 2nd category mountain, but there's no prizes on it today. Going down here with the man who leads the Tour de France on the road, leads the King of the Mountains competition now, Jeremy Roy. This is the peloton coming up, everybody looking around. Thomas Voeckler must be a little bit perplexed here, wondering why nobody's bothered to attack him, and he's going to find himself in yellow again for what is an horrendous day tomorrow as we finish on top of the Plateau de Bay. The rest of the breakaway's gone over about 4 minutes behind. Well, this is how life changes in the high Pyrenees, from the sun of the valleys below to the mist here. We're in the cloud line now. In fact, if anything, it's got quite bad up here, but they will descend very quickly out of it, which is just as well, because we've got that little splash of water in the tunnel, and it did look quite wet.
Yeah, it looked a very scary thing. At least the riders have been warned about that, and they will take care and attention as they go through. Fortunately, Phil, this low cloud, this low mist, you just saw there Anthony Charteau putting his hand out saying, guys, let's take it easy on this descent. Let's not take too many risks. In the fog, I've been down this descent in the fog before. It is very sketchy indeed, and in fact, on some occasions, you can't even see more than 30 or 40 feet in front of you. And if you come on the wrong line around one of these corners, there is no safety net to catch you.
So we're looking at the Maillot Jaune. Thomas Voeckler assured now that when he gets to the finish, he'll pull on again a Maillot Jaune because nobody has attacked him on the climb of the Haute Beach. We're on the way down now. The hazards will become the terrain itself. We are in the fog, which has got worse since Jeremy Roy came over the top. The gap was 7 minutes and 59 seconds at the top. So they added nearly 2 minutes to the advantage in the front group, which indicates that the back group, the main field and the leaders were not interested today. But just look at how this man can descend, Paul.
Well, once they get down here, this is downhill for a fraction, but then all of a sudden they get themselves to the Soulor and it kicks up for about 1.5 kilometers. It really affects the legs as well, because you've got the chill factor up here, you've got this low cloud which is very cold. With the downhill being run off here at 55 miles an hour, it starts to make the muscles extremely cold, and when you have to start climbing again, oh, it really hurts.
Well, that's a Venenert who's just come back there, the Belgian that went away thinking he might have got points for the King of the Mountain. Didn't, because there was too many riders in front, so he's gone away. And we're looking now at the speed of Thomas Voigtländer. This man is not afraid of going down hills, but you've got to take care on this descent. As you can see, there's nothing protecting you from a long way down. No parachutes are issued. This is Marc Madiot here.
Well, he gets very excited when he gets a bike rider into a position like this. He's got David Moncoutier chasing, and not far behind David Moncoutier now, Phil, is Thor Hushovd. And I think the order for Marc Madiot will be just to keep going on your own. Don't allow those riders to come back, because he knows if Thor Hushovd comes back to this group, it's game over.
This is the Col de Soulor at the moment. No prizes for this one. Just a big effort required, and a massive crowd is chosen here. The Norwegian flags are going to go mad in a moment when they realise Thor Hushovd, their world champion, is coming up behind. As Jeremy Roy pushes on over the top of the Col de Soulor. He now knows he's got the lead in one competition, but you can see by his face, Paul, this rider wants the stage win, something he's never had, and he doesn't want that sort of help from the crowd either.
Well, just thinking about the mention of the Norwegians there, Phil, there are only 2 Norwegians in the bike race, and both of them are in the top 8 on a mountain stage currently.
They are. They're up there. Boysenhagen, who went over the top just under 4 minutes back in the main chase from the original breakaway. Now take a look at this. This is how to descend. This man is one of the best descenders in the world, and he doesn't need to descend quick today. He's riding away from the peloton on the way down, but this way he gets to see where he's going. Remember, he fell yesterday descending, and those that were behind him also fell in sympathy because they couldn't see the corner. Now he's gone out front. He's riding very, very sensibly today, Tommy Voigtländer. He's not trying to drop the peloton. He just wants a nice clear view of what is a very rapid descent. He clips the bike into the corner and push your top half of your body in the opposite direction. Well, he's had a fabulous period in the yellow jersey, and another mountain has passed by and he has defied it. The peloton certainly helped him today because they never attacked. That's quite clear now that they intend to attack tomorrow. We have a top finish, a mountain top finish on the Plateau de Bailly, and that is going to make for a very, very exciting finish. And we have extended coverage of tomorrow for you. You'll see it all happen in the Tour de France on our last day in the High Pyrenees before we start to transfer across to the Alps. Anthony Charteau, the first rider to reach him, his teammate. And I think it's Frank Schleck who's come up into 3rd place, the man who was 3rd yesterday. Well, he's done that yellow jersey proud, hasn't he, Thomas Voigtländer? He's always been a fun. Let's get back up to the crowd line here, because this is the leader of the Tour de France today. The Union flag of Great Britain, the Basque flag of Spain. The Col de Soulor is over the top, no prizes. What a shame there's not even a prize up here for him, because he would have increased his lead in the King of the Mountains. Now a massive crowd knows this Col, though, as they watch him dip over the top and then continues his descent down to Lourdes. It's clouding up a little bit in Lourdes, but the sun's still out and it's very, very warm, and the headwind up the climb, maybe that destroyed all the attacks, judging by those Flanders flags. There was no point in attacking into the wind, they thought. Makes the descent a lot longer for the hard workers at the front of the peloton. Anthony Charteau has got onto the front, his teammate now, so he's protecting Voigtländer. I'm pretty sure, yeah, it is Frank Schleck. It might be Andy actually who's come up behind him rather than Frank. Some of them have put plastic tops over their racing jerseys now, just to keep out the cold air on the way down. They'll take them off as soon as they hit the valley. Once we get down to a town called Isaac Ost, that's where we level out, and that's about 139 kilometers into the day of racing, so about 13 kilometers from the finishing line, 7 miles or so. That is when they will hit flatter roads running to the finish. This is the leader now, Jeremy Roy, much further ahead. The computer is saying he's still got a superb lead over the field here. 8 minutes plus. Now what's happened here? Charteau has gone through that tunnel, popped out. He's took his risks through the tunnel and he's had to wait, I think, now to bring his leader back up to him. I don't know what happened, but anyway, they've gone through the tunnel sensibly. That's all that matters. And the yellow jersey has popped out the other side and he's still on his bike. This is the world champion, Thor Hushovd. Now he's on the climb of the Col de Soulor. His big body doesn't get up these slopes quite as quickly as Moncoutier or Jeremy Roy. Hushovd has still got to come up to Jeremy Roy. According to the computer, he's only just behind him, 35 seconds back of him. And that wind is really whipping across the tops here. And the funny thing is that down at the finishing line, the trees are absolutely still. There's no wind in the wood at all. So that might help them catch up as they come off the mountains. The peloton, very, very big today. With all of those riders, you can recognise them by now, I would think, are the favourites of the Tour de France. They're all riding near the front. The Schleck brothers, Alberto Contador, Cadel Evans, Samuel Sanchez, Tom Danielson, who is having a terrific ride in his first Tour de France. And now he's relying on the services of Christian van der Velde, who's 34th, to look after him in these mountains. Christian has all of the experience required to help guide Tommy D up into a top 10 finish and stay there. Moncoutier, soon there'll be two riders chasing that lone leader of Jeremy Roy. Well, this looks like the catch now as we continue the long descent away from the Col d'Aubisque. We've just had a little blip over the top of the Col de Soulor. We continue to descend towards Lourdes. David Moncoutier is being brought back by the world champion, Thor Hushovd, and that will put them just 1 minute and 29 seconds behind the leader on the road, Jeremy Roy. This is Marc Madiot, the manager of Jeremy Roy. Himself was a great cyclist. He won Paris-Roubaix twice. He's now shouting there at Jeremy Roy. He doesn't want this man to wait for those two behind because they'll beat him in the sprint.
No, and that's what the order of the day is, and he can take advantage of the descent because he will be touching speeds of between 35 to 40 miles an hour most of the time, which will make it very difficult for the group behind to pull back to him, but almost certainly very difficult for the main peloton to reduce their advantage. Well, we're looking there at 25 kilometers to go to the finish now, and that, I think, there's the junction. Quick chat, and I think Thor Hushovd is going to say, right, mate, let's organise ourselves because at 1.5 minutes we can still win this stage.
I'm just wondering, well, Moncoutier's got to work with Thor Hushovd. He'll never beat him in the sprint, but he's got to work with him because they're racing for second and third on the stage today. This is the peloton, still tightly packed together. They're on the climb of the Col de Soulor, which, as I've said, is not a prize climb. It's just a little blip on the way down at the mountain itself, the Aubisque. But Gilbert decided this is the time to go. There's a flurry of riders still in front. Boysenhagen of Team Sky is approximately 4 minutes ahead of Gilbert on the road, surviving from that breakaway. He's in company with the two other riders and still has a chance to stay away for the finish as well.
Well, I've got to question the tactics here, Phil, of Philippe Gilbert. Yes, I know he's got some incredible form in those legs of his, but there are not very many men in the world of professional cycling who can ride across a gap of 8.5 minutes. Unless, of course, he's thinking he can pick up some of the guys caught in the middle and just get himself a few more points for the points jersey competition.
I think that's exactly what he's doing, Paul. He wants points in that green jersey competition on the day that Mark Cavendish can't score again today because he's no longer in the peloton. He's only got a couple today. Little bit worried, in fact, but he's on his way at 1:23. That is the gap behind Jeremy Roy. At 8:32 is the spread to the field where Gilbert has just jumped away. So we'll see if he can, but I don't think he can possibly catch the leaders. I might pick up one or two of the remnants of the 10-man breakaway, one or two already back in the pack.
Well, this is going to be a long, hard chase now for David Moncoutier in the red and white jersey there of Cofidis in first position, and Thor Hushovd. Hushovd got a lot of firepower. Just having a quick look there to see which team manager in the car there for Garmin-Cervelo this afternoon.
I couldn't quite see who it was, but in any case, it looks as though it might have been Bingen Fernandez, the Spanish member of the squad there.
All of a sudden, something clicks in a bike rider's career, and it seems to have clicked for Jeremy Roy in the Tour de France this year. He's been aggressive, he's got himself into the moves, and having ridden over a climb like the Col de Tourmalet in first position, that gives you confidence, and it really takes away your fear of the mountains.
Well, he's got no fear today. He's the king of the mountains tomorrow on one of the toughest mountain stages of this year's Tour de France, as we say goodbye to the Pyrenees with a vengeance, and that will be tomorrow. But today We're looking here at the chase group, the remnants of that 10-man breakaway. This is Boysenhagen who's setting the pace, Jerome Pinot who's here now, and Lars Bak of HTC High Road, the Dane who's in his first Tour de France. He's just looking at the hands of Jeremy Watt, who digs away here. Now, don't forget to log on to NBCSports.com/podium. Every day during the tour, you could win a trip for two to next year's tour, a Cervelo S5 bike. You can also win a clean bottle, a Giro helmet. And today's code word is Feed Zone. Hushoff wants to win his 9th historical stage win of the Tour de France. Hushoff is also a long way down overall. He's 37 minutes back. David Moncoutier is 25, nearly 26 minutes off the lead. So they're not wanted men, but they want the stage victory. And it looks as though Hushoff is closing in now, 34 seconds.
Well, it's really going to the advantage of Hushoff Moncoutier, the chase, and they will very shortly, Phil, once they get into the flatter lands and straight in front of them, they should be able to see the lone leader, Jeremy Watt, because 31 seconds at speeds like this is around about 500 meters.
And that is all as they go through the zigzags. The road's in the favor of the leader just now. He's out of sight. He's certainly not out of mind. There is the peloton continuing on. Leopard Trekker contributing to the pace right now. So as they continue down, we're in the narrow streets for the leader. Will a Frenchman win today? There's a 2-to-1 chance at the moment. We'll take a break, but when we come back, we will have our commercial-free half hour. Is notching it up a ramp here, and Moncoutier is just about hanging on to his back wheel.
Well, Thor has got the bit between the teeth now. He realizes he's got to peg it back. The kilometers are starting to tick away, and they still haven't pegged back that last 15 seconds or so. As he goes around all of these corners, he knows he's aiming at that car fill. That in his mind is psychologically what he wants to get himself to, because he knows just in front of that car is the man he's chasing.
Well, I'll tell you what, we started to go up this little ramp, and he's actually increased his lead again. It went out to 20. Now that reaction from Hushoff's brought it back to 15. They can see him. He can see them. He's looking through his legs and under his arm. He knows they're coming, but he is not going to concede. Jeremy Watt has got too big a heart to give up.
Well, it's really difficult to know who to support in a situation like this. Hushoff, the big man who normally can't get himself over the mountains, trying to win a big mountain stage, or Jeremy Watt, the guy who's led this race for so long over the top of the Col de l'Aubisque and all the way down the valley and along this flat road. You know, cycling sometimes is very hard.
You look behind, it's like trying to hold off a tsunami, isn't it? As they slowly but surely roll towards him there. But he hasn't given up at all. 7.6 kilometers to go. And the gap is now 15 seconds. Two lonely cyclists on the left of the road, a Norwegian and a Frenchman, trying to work out how do we catch this man, because they're still locked at 15 seconds.
Well, 15 seconds, and Hushoff is such a strong character. He will not give up. But when you've been chasing for so long, sometimes you get to a point where you just cannot find any more strength, and you can't close down that last few meters. The feel strong, powerful character inside. He'll internalize all of this. He'll start to concentrate. But you know, for the last 5 kilometers, it's varied between 15 seconds and 20 seconds. It's not gone any less than that.
Meanwhile, at 10 kilometers to go, Philippe Gilbert and Bauke Mollema are still chasing here. And they're still ahead of the field. I mean, Philippe, the champion of Belgium, looking for green jersey points, even though there won't be that many, about 10. 5 kilometers to go, and he still looks as though he's flying across the roads of France today, bound for Lourdes. Well, dare I say, this boy is now going to have to pray for a miracle, because these two are so close to him. And in the last 3 miles of the race now, Hushoff, is he thinking, I'm not going to catch him, or is he thinking, I'll get him 2 kilometers out?
Well, Thor is not the kind of guy, Phil, who will give up in a situation like this. He's had glory in the Tour de France before. As you mentioned, he's won on 8 separate occasions. He's ridden the event 11 times, and he knows that an opportunity to win a stage does not present itself very often. David Moncoutier knows the same thing. He's a 2-time winner of stages at the Tour de France, but he doesn't want to spoil the party for France. The French have not had a stage over the first 12 stages of the Tour de France this year. And can you imagine what the French press would do to David Moncoutier if he helped Thor Hushoff to catch Jeremy Watt?
As they've done in the past, they've always said, oh, the French always chase the French. Well, today it looks as though Moncoutier on a rival team is not chasing the French. We've just gone under 4 kilometers to go now. That's about 5 minutes of pain for Jeremy Roy. And can Hushop close that gap? He is now under 4 kilometres to go. The gap is locked at 15 seconds. Well, it is kilometres to go now. He's about 4 and a bit minutes away from the finishing line. 4 and a bit minutes. If you could ride the bike for him, I reckon they would. The way the crowd is just cheering here, and this is the chase. And I think at the end of the day, there will be desperate moments from Hushop. He'll have to go, and he's gone.
Well, Hushop has got the power in those legs. He's just going to look at the rider in front, that white jersey on the shoulders of Jeremy Roy. It's still 13 seconds. It looks as if Jeremy Roy is starting to crack because Hushop is going across that gap.
This is the car. He can't rely on Moncoutier, so he's had to shake him off his wheel. Moncoutier, though, is like a limpet. He's coming back to him. What a pursuit. 3 riders dotted on the horizon here, racing for first place in the Tour de France. And Thor Hushoff, this incredible Norwegian, is now trying to reach this Frenchman and spoil the party.
Well, the camera looks back and it sees the white jersey with the rainbow bands around the middle. The current champion of the world. He won that title in Geelong, Australia in October of last year, and he's just about got himself into the slipstream. But Jeremy Roy will not give up until he knows that Thor Hushoff is right there locked into his wheel. He's made it across, Thor Hushoff.
He catches at 2.3 kilometres from the finish. 2 riders together. I think you'll find Moncoutier might get back. He's hit him straight away because he knows he's tired, and he's going to ride to a solitary win here. Thor Hushoff, the world champion. This will be the great moment. Under 2 kilometres to go for the world champion. Now he's free to fly in the most coveted jersey in the world, that of a world champion.
What a moment of pride for Norway. As you can see, the scramble. Moncoutier now is coming up to the wheel of Jeremy Roy, but nothing is holding back Thor Hushoff at all this afternoon. He is a great individual time trials. We said that in the early part of his career. He's the world champion at the under-23 level of the time trial. But here, he has changed his yellow tunic that he had over the first week of the Tour de France, Phil, and he's put back his World Championships jersey onto his shoulders. What a moment of joy that's going to be. He's looking around the corner to see tell me where the kilometre to go banner is, please.
The race was 152 kilometres today, 2 kilometres too far for Jeremy Roy, who will be on the podium tonight as the new leader in the King of the Mountains. But the stage win is going the way of the Norwegian world champion. And you would have got impossible odds on this man at the start of this stage because of the mountain in the middle. There is the 1 kilometre to go. This is rather a narrow approach to the town. They didn't expect a big bunch sprint, and indeed they haven't got one. Lourdes hasn't seen the Tour de France since the end of the 40s, and now they're seeing the world champion bring it on home.
Well, Gino Bartoli, the famous Gino Bartoli from Italy, was the last man to win on the streets of Lourdes this afternoon, and still, Phil, there are Norwegian flags all over the place.
Look at the crowd here, and this will inspire Hushoff all the way to the line for his 9th historical stage win. He rode his first Tour de France, and he lasted 12 days back in 2001. And what the fairy tale for the American Garmin Cervelo team continues here. He can't believe he's winning this stage with all those mountains behind him. This wasn't to be his day. It is now.
Well, he's going to be extremely satisfied with this one, Phil. He's won 8 times before at the Tour de France, but when you're a sprinter and you've dragged your body over the biggest mountains that the Pyrenees can slap in your face, it's going to be a massive moment of pride, and a huge smile will come across his face.
He just doesn't believe it. This will, I reckon, he'll rate as the finest win of his career. Win number 8 in the Tour de France. And he comes home, both arms in the world. The world champion, and he wants you to see he's the world champion, has to win a stage of the Tour de France in that jersey. There are only 2 Norwegians in the race. That's Boysenhagen and Thor, and they've both won stages now.
And they're both going to finish in the top 10 on today's stage as David Moncoutier comes across the line. He marked this race in his book today to try and get himself the victory. He's going to have to settle for 2nd place. But here is the hero of the day, Jeremy Roy. He failed for 2.5 kilometres. He cannot believe it. I know it hurts in the heart.
It was a brilliant, brilliant race across the mountains, and he didn't win it, but he went down fighting, and he has got a jersey, the first ever jersey he'll have pulled on in the Tour de France. But for Garmin Cervelo, this North American setup, they have done so well. They won the team time trial. They had a stage win with Tyler Farrar. They led with Thor Hushoff for a week, and now he's got his jersey off his shoulders and put his World Championship jersey on. and he wins a stage of the Tour de France today.
Well, I suppose with a sponsor like Garmin, Phil, he was never going to get lost in the mountains,
he was always on course for the win. I guess you're right. But that was a terrific result for Thor Hushovd as he comes home there. And look at the crowd here in Lourdes. Why have we taken so long to come back to this town? Nearly 60 years or more.
Quite remarkable. That will be one for his picture post book, I think, Phil. Crossing the line, winning a stage of the Tour de France in the maillot arc-en-ciel, the rainbow bands of the world champion. And you know, we never would have expected this because he had such a slow start to his season, with his first victory not coming until the month of June, a stage of the Tour of Switzerland.
And the Parfax, quite a sprint finish. So it's Boysenhagen. Jerome Pino's going to have a go at him off this corner, though. He's took a look at him, and they both got over the top of Boysenhagen. I think that's experience talking there, as Lars Bak in his first Tour de France. The Scandinavians are doing rather well. This is a Danish cyclist on HTC High Road. He gets the 4th place today. Pino is 5th. Boysenhagen is 6th. And we've got one more, it's the Gusev, I think, coming up. He'll get 7th.
Vladimir Gusev. Now it's a question of if the other riders in the gap behind did survive, and yes, this is Alessandro Patacchi coming in.
He's not going to beat in the sprint, though. I think he's going to have to fight off here. Boysenhagen.
Well, that's a big ride by him. Congratulations, I have to say, and he's surviving there with Martin Gelinghi.
So it's even worse for Gilbert. He's racing for 10th place, not 8th, and it looks as though he gets 6 points, which is still points, but what a way to earn them. He's under the last kilometre to go, and that's presuming that Mollema will not attack him in the sprint. Normally, he would not bother to beat him in the sprint because he's got no points, Mollema, in the green jersey classification.
That is a very tough way to earn yourself a few points, Phil, in the points classification, but he needs to keep chipping away at that competition every day when he knows that Mark Cavendish and the other sprinters like Rojas have been left a long way behind.
Are the points for 12th place? I think there are, just on there, and that's what the reward will be from what's left of the peloton, and Rojas will have to go for those places now.
Well, it's 6 points available for the 10th rider to cross the line. 6 very slim points for Philippe Gilbert, but it doesn't matter. As far as he's concerned, 6 points here, 6 points there. They could add up to 20 or 30 points by the time he gets up to Paris. And over the next couple of days, there's only really one more day for the big sprinters, Rojas and Cavendish, to try and get themselves the big, massive points for the flat stage wins.
So I don't think Mollema will bother to attack Gilbert. He knows why he's attacked. He knows what he wants, and he's going to let him take 10th place on the day. Boy, he's not taking any chance, is he? Just kicks away from Mollema, who isn't even racing, so you can save your energy, Philippe. There you go. But he's racing for time as well because he's good place overall. He was in 12th place, so he may have gone up. He may have gone up into the top 10 with that little breakaway.
Yep, I think if he's gained a minute and a half, Phil, he's going to got himself right into the top 10. He might even be threatening the position of Tommy Danielson in 9th.
Now, Rojas is coming. He's got about 4 points if he wins this sprint. And that will probably keep him in 2nd place in the green jersey, just ahead of Philippe Gilbert and behind Mark Cavendish, who retains the green jersey today. He's in 2nd place. I don't think there's anybody left in the bunch to beat him. They're going to have a go at him. As we come up to the line with the peloton, Rojas, the nearest man to Mark Cavendish in the green jersey competition, is going to take out just 4 points here as he wins the peloton sprint for 12th place today.
Well, it's so these small points, Phil, by the time we get up to Paris, there could be the difference between a green jersey and 2nd place. And that's why these intermediate sprint points are going to be extremely important for guys like Mark Cavendish. But what a day for Norway.
Well, Hushovd gets in history his 9th stage win in a Tour de France. Moncoutier, who's won before, he finishes 2nd. Jeremy Roy failed on his bid to win, but he's the king of the mountains now. Lars Bak 4th in his first Tour de France. Jerome Pino 5th and 5 minutes 2 seconds back. Big time gaps, but they had big time in hand. Eddie Boasson-Hagen, he's in 6th place. Gusev 7th, all in the breakaway. Patacchi stayed away. Gelinghi was in the break. Gilbert best from the bunch. He got away to finish in 10th place. And he'll be in the top 10 overall with that result. Rojas cleaned up from the bunch. Look at the gap for the bunch in the yellow jersey. 7:37 there. And Thomas Voigtler, the yellow jersey, he gets another one very shortly. He's at the same time at 7:37. Here he goes behind the scenes now. to sign a few more yellow jerseys, because very, very shortly he'll be on stage to receive another yellow jersey in the Tour de France. Okay, well, we'll take our usual break at this stage, and here the podium. Let's go. And there he is on the podium, Thor Hushovd of Norway, without doubt the finest cyclist they've ever produced. He's now 33 years of age. He's won the stage of the Tour de Suisse this year, which I hope you saw with us on Versus. And now as world champion, he's won a stage of the Tour de France, his 9th in history and his 1st in the mountains.
Display with the rainbow jersey. Talk us through what the plan was when you attacked on the Aubisque.
The plan with attack was to actually get a small advantage, so I can do my little own rhythm up there, and because I knew riders like Moncoutier want to attack. When he attacked, I cannot follow, so I think I did a good move there, and yeah, my tactic worked out perfectly.
When you caught Moncoutier on the descent, what words did you exchange?
First I said, I asked what the time gap was, and then I said, come on, let us try to get him together, and he worked a little bit, but I had to do a big work for myself, but I said, I'm going to give everything. If it works, it's perfect. If not, I tried.
Speaking of giving everything, it looked for a while that Jeremy Waugh was going to put up a great defense to stay in front. You were about 15 seconds for a number of K. Where did you find that extra gear?
It's when I see the wind is there, when I getting close to the finish line. I mean, that's when I really can go deep, and I think I always control him, so I knew if Moncoutier attacked, we can get him straight away. So I think today my tactic worked out 100% perfect.
It did indeed. Congratulations on a great win.
Thanks.
The Pyrenean chain of mountains all seem to have been packed into one day of racing in the Tour de France today. 6 major climbs, and we culminate at the top of the Plateau de Bay, the highest of all 6 of them. We're sat right on the top. It is a beautiful day here. Light winds are blowing, and we're ready to see the action in today's stage Tour de France. Let's first of all see how they got underway today. I would think rather nervously, actually. In the yellow jersey, Thomas Voigtler, as he was last time he rode up this mountain.
Yes, that was a long time ago, in fact 2004, but as soon as the white flag was drawn in by the race organizer Christian Prudhomme, the attacks came thick and fast. Not surprising at all, Phil, to see FDJ on the attack.
Well, the majority of riders who don't believe they can win the Tour de France were anxious to get out of the peloton very early on and get a lead. But for one man still in the peloton, Cadel Evans, a projected favourite for today, he had a bike change, and quickly had to rejoin the peloton.
Well, there was no panic for him, but at the front, a breakaway was starting to form, and a very large breakaway of riders. 20 riders in all, including 2 members of Team Leopard Trek, Linus Gerdemann and Jens Voigt.
So the plan's already afoot, perhaps, for Leopard Trek. David Miller is in there too, for Garmin Cervelo. Christophe Libon, the champion of France, Sylvain Chavanel. Sandy Cassar, he's the best placed overall. He's only 8 minutes and 47 seconds behind. But he'll have to go some to hold off the onslaught, which is certain to come today. There's a 4-man chase group, Perez, Rui Costa. Remember, he won at Superbest. Pino and Mallory, they're chasing at round about 1 minute 20 seconds. The race is actually split up, but all of the men on the attack are not affecting the final destination of the jersey yet. And this is the job of the men in green, the Europcar squad of Thomas Voigtler. Now, they're just, as we go back to the live pictures now, this is coming up, though. This is just a look back of about 1 minute ago, I think. We're heading up to the top of the Col de Porte d'Aspet.
Well, Michael Delage is the rider from FDJ who saw the possibility of an acceleration, but when he saw no reaction at all coming from the other guys in the breakaway, he eased up over the summit of the climb, and the second rider to come by was Bauke Mollema.
So Delage doing his teammate and King of the Mountains leader Roy a little bit of a favour there, because he's taken the major points, because Roy is still back in the pack. Now we can look at the live pictures here, and straight onto the green jersey of Mark Cavendish, and he is in the back of the peloton, so he's still with the peloton on the climb of the Porte d'Aspet, and so too just ahead of him yesterday's winner in the World Championship stripes, Thor Hushovd.
Well, it doesn't look very good when you have a look at the race profile there. Yes, we've got 1 second category under the belt, but there's still 2 first categories to go, a second and a third. But to me, this race today is all very much about that HC, the all category climb, outside categorizable climb at the end of the day. Almost 16 kilometers of racing, That's 10 miles from the valley below to the top. Well, it's good to see Europcar again adopting the front end of the peloton to control once more for Thomas Voeckler.
It is a stunningly lovely day if you want to go cycling in the Pyrenees. Unless you're in the Tour de France, it'll be painful for people like number 171, Mark Cavendish, who wears that green jersey with pride, but won't be worrying too much today about scoring points in it. We've just come over the top of the Porte d'Aspet, where Mikel Delage did his King of the Mountains leader teammate Jeremy Roy a favour by taking the maximum points off there, because Roy is still back in the peloton.
Yeah, tough day for a man if you're a sprinter. Thor Hushovd having a glorious day yesterday as a sprinter, saying that that was probably one of the best days of his life in the Tour de France. I'm sure he would agree that winning the World Champions jersey was also a pretty impressive day. He now is, like many of the other sprinters, suffering at the back end of the peloton, and they will try and stay in contact for as long as possible. Sometimes what a sprinter will do, like we can see Mark Cavendish here, is get dropped off inside the last 1.5 kilometres before the summit, just so as not to go into what we call the red zone, the part of your body that starts to build up lactic acid, so that once he then goes over the crest, a couple of risks fill on the descent, he can get back into the field and go through the same scenario again and again and again on today's stage.
He's got a 6 kilometres. That's where Mark would like to get just a couple of points in the green jersey, but as the race situation is at the moment, there are no points available in the main field. We have that leading group of 20 men chased by 4, a couple of more chasing as well, and then we finally get back to the peloton.
Yeah, the man at the back of the group here in the red, white and blue is Sylvain Chavanel. He's actually the rider responsible for forcing that breakaway off the front end of the peloton in the early kilometres of the race. Not surprising, the champion of France wants to try and have a bit of glory on these Pyrenean stages. He was doing very quickly by another good protagonist for the long breakaway, of course, Sandy Cassar.
And this is the peloton coming over the top of Col Porte d'Aspet, which is good for Mark Cavendish. He's only just dangling off the back. He'll stay with them now as they go over the top. We've got a 5-minute spread here, the peloton at 4:59, and all of the favourites are still in that. I think they'll ride very, very sensibly today, and they'll save all their eggs for the big basket at the end, which is the Plateau de Bay. And if these 20 riders can get a big lead today, it wouldn't surprise me if they stayed away to the finish, at least some of them, to get the day's prizes. But most of them are at least 20 minutes and up to an hour behind the yellow jersey. So they're not going to chase these riders. It's a perfect way at the moment for Thomas Voeckler.
Might just have noticed the hand signal there from the rider sitting on the front. That's Johan Genet. He actually was indicating to the guys behind, there's a very severe right-hand bend coming up. Take it easy, start to apply your brakes now.
Well, there's a beautiful picture, isn't it? We're snaking down the Porte d'Aspet now. 26 years tomorrow since the Olympic road race champion Fabio Casatelli died on this pass when he fell on the descent. He was the roommate and teammate of Lance Armstrong at the time. And I can't believe that 26 years has passed by. 17th of July, 1995. So the field twists their way down. The leaders themselves, there are 20 of them. If Perez, Costa, Pinot and Mallory can keep descending well, the gap is now down to 1:05 behind. They might well get up. I think we can have a look now at the famous memorial, which was, there it is there. That's on the climb of the Porte d'Aspet. And this was erected in October in 1995. Fabio had died in July of the same year. So this is the field making the way steadily on now, and Française des Jeux again flying the flag at the front, but there's a long way to go today. I suppose in some ways it's good news for Mark Cavendish, because there are 15 places available for points at the sprint. The peloton at 5 kilometres to go here. Mark Cavendish is trapped in the peloton, 500 metres, I beg your pardon. These are the leaders. Now there's no reason to sprint up front, to be honest, because all of the points are here and nobody is challenging in that green jersey competition. So that's good news for Mark Cavendish. He won't have to worry about who's winning the sprint today. The first 15 riders get points, and 20 points goes to the first man over the line. We're launching the sprint here, and not surprisingly, we've got Française des Jeux having a little dig, and it looks like David Miller is digging in on the right as well. And it's, I'm not too sure who got that one, Paul. Did you notice?
I think it was Miller. It
Yeah.
looked like it was 56. The reason they're sprinting, Phil, is because at the end of the day, there's still money at stake here. They might not be too concerned about the points on a race like this, but 1,500 euros or almost 2,300 US dollars is not too bad. Lunge for the line.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, Miller's
He might
slowing
be-
down a fraction.
Bit of a kick here and a push of that bike. Now, Michael Delage it is. Francis Giger, more money in that bank today. Delage has just been first over the Porte d'Aspet. Now he's got the first of the sprints.
Yeah, Miller will get second and 1,000 euros or $1,400. So they'll get themselves organised once again as they go through there. They've taken away all of the points, so
Yeah.
there's no reason for Rojas, Philippe Gilbert, or even for Mark Cavendish to have a sprint at this point.
No, he's gone. He's had the day off, if you like, Mark Cavendish. He's much more concerned about getting over all of these hills which lie ahead now, because we'll soon be on the first category climb. It's a 14-kilometre climb of the Col de la Cour. That'll take us up to 62 kilometres today.
I'm talking.
We've got 20 riders out in front with a few chasers in between. 4 chasers are now within 20 seconds. Perez, Costa, Pino and Mallory trying to contact the 4 leaders. And I think we just picked up the 4 chasers here. There they are. That's Rui Costa, number 83, who won the climb as Supervest for his first stage win the other day. Now these boys are closing in fact, they're about to contact. There they are. They're about to be 24 front runners now, and we're 43 kilometres into today's stage. That puts us about, just trying to work it out, Paul, 7 kilometres from the start of the climb of the Col de la Cour.
Yeah, but what this is doing tactically for a number of teams, it's actually putting up teammates for later on in the race, because there are now 2 riders up here from Euskaltel Euskadi. There's 2 riders up here for Leopard Trek, and that could be really important in the latter part of the day when the race begins to split up and the big guns come forward.
Well, that was a good chase. It took them a long time to bridge that gap, but they have bridged that gap. Now, don't forget to log on to nbcsports.com/podium every day during the Tour. It's your chance to win a trip for 2 to the 2012 Tour de France, a Cervelo S5 bicycle, and also a clean bottle and gyro helmet. They're now starting on the first category climb, which puts him just below the steepest climbs. Look to the right there, 8C means outside category. That's the steepest of the day. First category are hard enough, believe me. This is the Col de la Cour, 14.1 kilometres of ascension, and the riders are going to get dizzy today because they go up and they go down, and they do it in all 6 times. The 6th time they don't go down, they finish right on the top of the Plateau de Bay. All the boys in green are the Europcar teammates. There's the board telling them 14.1 kilometres to climb, and there you can see they're climbing up to nearly 1,400 metres, and the gradient is steady at 5.7%. Delage at the moment setting the pace there. And everybody concentrating. Gerdeman goes through, and the black top here had his big moment in the Alps a few years ago when he won a stage there and got the yellow jersey.
Phil, just to come back to the explanation of why teams in a race like today, a stage like today, like to have riders in the front. Well, Ruben Platzer was in the breakaway on the day when Sammy Sanchez attacked on the day up to Luz Ardiden, and Ruben Platzer, when he heard that his teammate Sanchez was coming back, he dropped back a fraction and paced him up the first couple of kilometres of the climb. And it's that kind of assistance that can actually be the difference between winning a stage or losing a stage, which is why you've got riders from the teams of the leaders in this breakaway, this long breakaway on a day like today. There's a lot of things going on tactically. Some guys are in the breakaway to try and win the stage. Others are in there to try and win the Tour de France for their team.
And David Miller is one of those riders. He's been told not to do any work in the breakaway and await the arrival of Tommy Danielson if he comes up.
To him. It's just the way the race is unfolding as we see again. This is a little move by Delage as he's about 200 meters away from the top of the Col de la Cour, and for him he's going to bank a few points in the King of the Mountains competition once again for FDJ. Francis Giger, as I will continue to call them, I think, Phil, have been the most aggressive team since the start of the Tour de France. They've been in every breakaway, and I think they're finally starting to get something out of this event.
They have. They've been a terrific team. He gets the points. And that takes the major points away from anybody else. So Jeremy Roy will keep his King of the Mountains lead jersey at the moment without turning a pedal in anger. There's Sylvain Chavanel getting the Daily News and putting it into his jersey to shut out the wind on the fast descents. Remember, we've heard from the management of the Garmin Cervelo, and they said when they checked out the computer, the printout yesterday from Thor Hushovd, he hit 110 kilometers an hour going downhill, which is 69 miles an hour. So that's how fast these boys descend.
Yeah, the thing about just going back to the newspaper story there, Phil, it is quite amazing. In this day of modern technology and modern clothing, one of the best insulators to go down a hill is just to put an old piece of newspaper up the front of your racing jersey.
It's funny, but even in all the modern materials, it seems to work really well, I have to agree, yeah. Now, this is IJssel here, is it? A bit dark on my camera. But IJssel is just pouring some water over Mark Cavendish. As they've accelerated now for the top of the climb, Mark has eased back here. Now he won't lose too much, hopefully. There's the water
another
from
thing,
IJssel.
Yeah, another reason for this, Phil, is this will be really ice cold water. And what happens sometimes on a stage like this, you almost start to go into a sleep mode, and you start to not concentrate quite as much. And that cold water, that burst of cold water, wakes you up just like having a cold shower first thing in the morning. And I think what Bernie IJssel was trying to get Cavendish to do there was, come on, wake up, let's get your mind back into this. Let's start concentrating on the effort we need to put in to stay in contact with the group. We don't want to get dropped now, because there's still a couple more climbs to go that we've got to stay in contact with if we want to stay inside of the time limit.
Yeah, it's a long, you would have to ride at the moment 104 kilometers behind the race, and it's unlikely he would get through to the finish without being eliminated. So he needs to at least not lose too much, and he can chase it back on the descent, because the peloton are not going to rip down that descent at the moment. It's all under the control of Europcar. So we're continuing here. These are now the leaders on the way down, as they're just coming up to 2 hours in the saddle today for 64 kilometers. So they've done about 33 kilometers an hour average, but most of the day they've been going uphill, of course, which is still pretty quick. Just got one rider pushing on here in the breakaway. Just trying to see if anybody else is coming out to play. This is Mikhail Ignatieff of Katusha. I think it might be the Cofidis rider, actually, Poincoutier, who's just coming down. Looks like it might be Cofidis. So leading the way down the descent. Riders like to make their own way down the descent. They like to see where they're going. We've seen one or two nasty falls. Oh, that's a very tight left-hander as well. He's done it well. Remember too, our motorbike camera has to do the same roads just in front of the riders, full of admiration for them. He sits there making sure he actually only sees through his camera black and white images as well, and it's amazing how he picks out these riders. He knows who he wants as he sits on the back. They don't allow them to sit back to back anymore like the old days, so he's got to face forward and turn himself around. So that was a very tight turn. I think we can show you that again. Watch this, a bit of a speed wobble on from David Moncoutier. Look at that back wheel. Oh my goodness, we had that wheel locked up there. He was beginning to worry he wasn't going to get round that left-hander, but he did. Let's hope the peloton take it with a bit more respect. Didn't lose any ground, that's for sure. He's in a bit of a speed wobble on his bike at the minute. And somebody, I think it's an FDJ rider coming across. It might be Mikel Delage, who's just gone over the top in first place. As they start to go, the order over the top was Delage, Sylvain Chavanel, Sandy Cassar. That'll be Cassar coming across, I would think. Bogue Mollema, Arthur Vichot and Luis Leon Sanchez. They're the first six and the only ones that score points in the King of the Mountains. Delage got himself 10. Points at the end today are doubled as they were on Luz Ardiden, so the 40 points for the man that wins the stage today, the King of the Mountains. And that's why Samuel Sanchez, no relation to Luis Leon in the breakaway today, got the leader's jersey in the King of the Mountains. Now, yes, it is Sandy Cassar who's trying to reach him, who went over the top of the climb in third place. Sylvain Chavanel put that newspaper up his jersey and dropped back a little bit. Cassar is a magical descender. This guy can really race a bike downhill. Well, Sandy Cassar here, Paul, as he comes down. Remember when he won the stage, albeit about a year later, when they disqualified Mikel Astaloa down in Briançon. He descended off the mountain, the Grand Saint-Bernard, like a stone, and he finished second on the day and eventually was awarded the win because of the disqualification. He is a really, really good descender.
And that was a long descent on that occasion. It was a 40-kilometer descent. I think it was the longest descent I've ever gone down in the Tour de France, and definitely Sandy Cassar knows how to do that. I think the move here, Phil, has come because he realizes he's joined there by Julien Fares.
Yeah, I thought it was Moncoutier who said Fares, yeah.
I think the reason that he actually has done this is because he found that that group of 24 riders is starting to get too many passengers in it, and this is probably the best move for him at the moment, to put his back into it and not drag the rest of those riders along.
Well, I think they'll have worked out the tactics of some of the boys in that breakaway. They really are passengers. They're not out to keep the breakaway clear. They're just sort of advanced guards waiting for the arrival of their team leaders. In the case of David Miller, that would be Tommy Danielson. In the case of the two Leopard Trek riders up here, that would be the Schleck brothers. And so they really need to re-establish the breakaway, get a new breakaway going, if they can, of men who want to win the day. Because there's only 90 now. We're inside 100 kilometers to go now. 6 minutes 40 as the peloton head up towards the top of the climb. Now these two are on the way down. So they're zipping up his jersey is Tommy Voeckler. He's getting ready to see what newspapers are on offer. If there's any left, we've got rid of 24 already as they come over the top of the Col de la Cour. The clock is going to give us a distance around about the same time gap that we had at the bottom. As it turns out, as they come up to the top now, everybody holding up drinking bottles. Where's the newspapers? That's what they're going to be more interested in, to stick up with the jumpers. 6:51 at the top, so that's the best lead they've had actually. So they've continued to increase on the climb. And as they go over the top of the Col de la Cour, they had 4:59 over the Porte d'Aspet, which was about 35 kilometers ago. They're now 6:51 up. Time for a drink, a stretch of the back, a drop down the hill, and we'll take a commercial break. We'll see you all back with us as we continue our descent. Looking now at Sandy Cassar, who's showing everybody how to descend at high speed. He is an incredible descender, this man. He's scaring Julien Alvarez to death here because Julien was leading. Now he's just trying to keep Cassar in his gun sights, and they've just descended away from the other 22 riders.
Well, that's because, Phil, of the size of the group. They weren't happy with 24 riders and 12 passengers, so they decided if you want to be in my bus this afternoon, you better come to the front, take a ticket and do a little bit of work. But Cassar is an excellent descender. That, again, comes from practicing cyclocross in the winter, that strange sport when you have to go cross fields, get the bike on the shoulder, run up hills. It teaches a lot about yourself. It keeps you fit during the winter months, but it also teaches you the agility and ability to maneuver your bike well, especially on descents like this.
And these are the teammates of Europcar, pushing on a little bit, but still guiding their Queen Bee everywhere he wants to go. And Voeckler, it's routine just now, and he hopes it'll stay that way, believe me. Well, we're looking at Mark Cavendish now, and he has just rejoined on the descent, aided by his faithful, as Paul calls him, his pilot fish. Bernie Eisel has brought him back to the pack. So he lives to fight on the next climb now, which is the second category climb of the Col de Trappe, and that's about 600 feet less than the one they just come over.
Yeah, interesting. A shame if the team had to be taken apart, because it has been over the last 3 to 5 years the most successful team on the international circuit, whether with the professional men or even a very successful women's program.
Well, between the two, they've won over 500 races, I think the tally is at the moment. They are very, very successful. I cannot believe that there isn't a sponsor who will step up to the table before the end of the year, but if decisions aren't made soon, of course, the riders will be free to take on new teams.
Well, Phil, don't worry, we're in the Pyrenees. Yesterday we saw the vultures. There'll be a lot of vultures circling around the HTC High Road, looking to see which riders they can pick up and move across in the transfer season.
These villages that we race to now in this part of the area, this is Sykes in the region of the Ariège. Narrow roads, they really are narrow. It's hard to pass two cars when you drive through them in the evening. But a beautiful, stunning area of France.
Yes, it is. This town actually is a very old town, and its name comes from the Occitan, which is the local language here in the Pyrenees, word for saïs, which means shroom out of the rock. It's also comparable to the Latin saxu. It's a former frontier town created in the time of Charlemagne, and he built two neighbouring castles here, La Garde and the Mirabat, to protect the roads into the Pyrenees.
Well, the crowd has all turned out here, boosted by the tourists, of course, today, as the two leaders now have hit the feed stone. This is where they catch those little bags and keep on going. And two riders have got there first, and they're both French. The Tour de France is turning French. They lead in 3 classifications after yesterday, and now they've got the two leaders on the road. Vive la France.
Vive France. Vive la France, vive la République, as we make our way down another magnificent valley road, the Salat Valley. And again, this is very important, as we can see David Miller coming across. Nice move. David Miller himself, a very good descender.
I love a man that listens to his team director. Jonathan Vaughters told him not to do any work, to save his energy, and here he comes across the gap to join the leaders. David Miller, as Jonathan Vaughters mentioned, I'd completely forgotten, did win a time trial up the Plateau de Bailly, not in the Tour de France, but he does know the countryside very, very well. And I have to say, David has had a wonderful season of racing this year, and he's on form, and he's in a good position to join those two. Now, he must have come down that hill really quickly.
Well, he took the risks going round the corners, and he's a good bike handler himself. As Thomas Voeckler used a bit of the road. My son, why don't you? He almost came unstuck there, trying to stay in contact with his teammates.
One or two of these bends will catch them out. They are very, very sharp indeed. But Voeckler is one of the best descenders as well, as we've seen, although he has overshot on one occasion, and he has fallen off.
Down here is right at the confluence of 2 rivers, and it guards 3 gateways across the Pyrenees.
Yes, and in the winter those rivers probably flow quite heavily as the snows fall. This is the Salat, which has been coursing down with the riders all the way. The other one is the Garonne, which is probably the most famous of them all.
It rises up very high up in the Pyrenees before going out into the Atlantic Ocean, not too far away. You mentioned earlier, Phil, these typical belfries here in the Pyrenees, and you can see another one there, and the bells are in fact chiming along to welcome the Tour de France into town. Nice to see a little bit of canoe and kayak going on down there too. A lot of canoe and kayak happens right up here in the Pyrenees. These rivers really do lend themselves to it.
Well, that's a long, thin line of cyclists, and it's the main peloton of the Tour de France, and the green jersey got back into it, Mark Cavendish, as again the streets are rather narrow, but they're in a long straight line, so they'll feel quite wide at the moment. We've still got those 3 riders up front. The official time gap is now 1:35 to the rest of the breakaways. Rui Costa, who has dropped from that break, he's dangling off a little bit further back, and the peloton have gone out now to 7 minutes 11 seconds. I'm not surprised, because Miller, Cassar and El Ferez are going to ride really hard now.
Well, that's firepower. When you start to add David Miller, the winner of the final time trial stage of the Giro d'Italia, into a breakaway, you've got some strong men. And the damage is happening because although you can see here Mark Cavendish managed to get back to the peloton before the bottom of the climb, there is a little bit of a split, so there is a scramble to stay in contact today.
Yeah, with him what was the King of the Mountains, who was riding so well yesterday. He finished 3rd in the end, but he got his lead in the King of the Mountains, Jeremy Roy. These are the leaders. Now, this is what they wanted to do, break the grip of those. Too many in that breakaway were along for the ride and didn't want it to succeed, so they had to take a chance to do it somehow. I think we said that someone would have to attack. It was, in fact, El Ferez, the rider in the front, to attack first. Second, he was joined by Cassar, and then David Miller crossed on his own. Now, we've gone to the 3 leaders here. We caught a glimpse there of somebody just trying to get off the front of the main peloton. But the actual breakaway is also splintering, and it's because they also are getting fed up with the passengers in that breakaway. We're coming onto the lower slopes. Well, there were 3 leaders, but a good kilometre on to the Col de la Trappe at the moment. This is Luis Leon Sanchez, and this is the breakaway. Well, it looks to me as though they've actually regrouped here. They've all come together. 5 kilometres to climb to the top of the climb. This is Di Gregorio, number 62. He's a Frenchman on the Astana team. He's a very, very good climber. And that rider actually is attacked from this breakaway, the AG2R rider. Should be Riblon, who has just made his little move. And that's how he did it. Christophe Riblon deciding he wanted more speed from the peloton in the breakaway. They let him go a little way. Now, it looks as though they have reacted to that, and that might help split that chasing group up. These are the leaders. Looking now at number 1. He wears that number as winner of the Tour de France the past 2 years. He's being helped here by Brian Van Borg, his teammate, just in front of him. And a big test day for Alberto Contador today. Is he injured? Is his knee injured? Is he sore because he had his saddle rearranged as well from a crash? Or is he sick? Is he kidding us? Just what is he doing?
The Plateau de Bay is going to give us the answer to all of those
Indeed
questions, I hope, Phil.
Indeed. The leaders themselves have just started the climb of the Col d'Agnès. Well, look at that, Paul. That has been a terrific ride by Christophe Riblin. Here he comes across the gap just as the climb starts of the Col d'Agnès.
Well, as I said, Phil, obviously motivated by the fact that it was right here in these very Pyrenean mountains that he got himself a stage of the Tour de France last year, and that was to Aix-les-Trois-Domaines. And it is a very strange thing, the psychology of a rider. If you've won a race before previously in your career, you're very motivated to go back to it the year after. And exactly the same in the Tour de France. If you get to a certain region which smiles upon you, it gives you that little bit of extra encouragement to do well on those days. Some riders can ride well in the Pyrenees, some riders can ride well in the Alps. The best riders and the greatest champions can ride well in both range of mountains.
Indeed they can. This is the main chase here, and they are just starting the climb now of the Col d'Agnès. It's our second first category climb of the day. They've just got one small third category after that, and then we hit the bottom of the Plateau de Bay. This is a very, very good climb, this one, Paul. It's 10 kilometres or 6 miles we climb up the Col d'Agnès today. And now Riblin has contacted the leaders. Let's hope he can give them some extra firepower, because the gap is down to 7 minutes and 42 seconds.
The 10 kilometres is being distanced.
A little bit surprised to see that, but the three French riders are riding away. We're getting into one of the steepest sections. It starts steepest of all this. And it is the difficult part. He's got to hang on. He might get back into his zone and pedal back up, because you can see by the speed of the other three, this is a real tough section.
No, it certainly is. It's the first section from the end of the first kilometre to the end of the third kilometre is almost 10% in gradient. After that, may I say, you get a bit of respite at about 8.1%, maybe not.
Well, Miller looks happy at that percentage. He doesn't like this 9.9 bit. Now, we're seeing all the time Leopard Trek. Now, we saw them do this on the first day in the Pyrenees. One by one, their men in black dropped off. There's a bit of a warning about the bend coming up here from O'Grady. And in the end, they were left just with Frank and Andy Schleck. And in the end, Frank got third. The plan of the day was to have got in the victory, but they couldn't quite get on terms with Samuel Sanchez. And talking of Samuel Sanchez, we haven't seen anything of him yet, and I'm quite sure we will soon.
Well, we don't need to see Samuel Sanchez until the final climb of the day, but bear in mind he had two teammates in that leading group, which at one time was 24 riders, and that was Ruben Perez and Gorka Izagirre, and they will be looking on him to help out a little bit later on. Team Katusha, they've got a man trying to get across this gap, and this is Egor Silin, a full complement of Russian riders on the Russian professional cycling team Katusha.
Only 4 of them have gone, though, so there's only 5 left on this squad at the moment. This is Silin. 7:46 now, they're holding. There's the tail of it, just on the left of our picture. There's only about 45 riders, maybe 50 here. As we look here at what is left of the peloton, it's all under the pressure still of this incredible Australian, Stuart O'Grady. From Adelaide, it's his job to set the pace as long as he gets 5 kilometres now of the Col d'Agnès. They're halfway up this mountain. The field is reduced by half. There's only about 50 riders left here. The gap is 7 minutes exactly as we speak to a general regrouping up at the front. It's not as many as it was. There are 9 riders in that front group now.
About to be 11, because Sylvain Chavanel starting to ride across the gap with Linus Gerdemann. And again, good tactical move here once again by Team Leopard Trek, because once that group from behind starts to catch these riders, you add 2 men from Leopard Trek to make your forces extremely strong, and that is a beautiful sight for us, but I'm not sure what the guys think about it on the bikes.
Well, I'll tell you what, they probably as well, they don't see that picture because they might think it's not a good idea, but when they talk about the scaling of the mountains here, then you can see high. Every time they turn around a corner, they go up another 100 feet or so. And the peloton down there today, the men in black pedaling at the front. The yellow jersey of Thomas Voeckler is still there as we roll on towards the last 60 kilometres of the day of racing. He will not give that yellow jersey up without a fight. If he could just hang on to it today like he did a few years ago on this mountain, albeit by 22 seconds, he could go for another couple of days in yellow. We have a rest day also on Monday. Fabian Cancellara, a man who is a time trialist and is too big for mountains, always playing the team role, sits there in second place, his head bowed just a little. And when the still Stuart O'Grady setting the pace here, as he gets some idea of the slopes here for the breakaway coming to the summit. Well, Linus Gerdemann, he doesn't look too well on the front of this breakaway. He has been behind, and Jens Voigt saw him come back and told him to get back up to the front. Well, that's what he's tried to do, but how long he can stay there. Anthony Charteau is the front right in the green jersey. Sitting at the back here is Silin, Igor Silin, the Russian rider on Katusha. He caught them, the leaders, before the whole rest of the breakaway caught him. There's only 11 left, though, of the original 24 that went early on today. But as we're now looking at Anthony Charteau's sprint here for the top of the climb now, surprisingly, no, this is last year's King of the Mountains for France, and he's coming now. This will be the first time he'll have gone over the top this year as a winner, and he goes over the top of the Col d'Agnes, and I don't think Sylvain Chavanel can challenge him just behind. He wants this as a matter of fact. Oh, you're looking the wrong way. That is not the way to do it, because Sylvain Chavanel has taken it off him. He looked left, and Chavanel came right.
Well, Chavanel, he's got it in his mind today to maybe lay down some foundations to challenge for that competition a little later on. And that acceleration, it was a good acceleration by Anthony Charteau, but he doesn't quite have the legs that he had last year, and I think that's because he's had to battle back from serious injury in the first part of this season. But at least he tried, at least he made sure that he kept a few points in the bank for Team Europcar. Now it's the short descent off the Col de l'Agnes, and then they'll start the next climb of the day, the very much shorter climb as they head up towards the summit of the Port de l'Ers.
Well, Chavanel was 6th overall at the start of the day in the polka dot jersey, and he's putting himself, I think, his 10 points for the top of that climb. Yes, it is 10 points. Charteau gets 8, so he's helped himself up the ladder. No change overall at the moment as we go back to the main field here. Still Stuart O'Grady earning his money today. My goodness me, he is second place, waiting to take over, but doesn't know when. Is Fabian Cancellara sitting up into the top of another collar. He's still very much in that leader's yellow jersey. Lost none of his time yet. Now going down with the front runners today, the pacemakers. There are 11 of them. The order over the top is Chavanel, Charteau, Izagirre, Di Gregorio, Sandy Cassar and Christophe Riblon. That's how they went over the top of the Col d'Agnes.
Well, a brief descent, 4 kilometers, 2.5 miles downhill before they turn their heads back up to the skies once again, and that will be the last small climb before the massive climb that we've been talking at, the climb that takes the riders right up to the top. Christian Koren here, Phil, from Slovenia. He went from the front of the race straight the way through this yellow jersey group, straight back to the bar of the team car to get on board as many drinks as possible.
Field here, continue driving on the descent. I think he can show you that here. This is the sweep on the right-hander, and 10 down just seemed to lose it coming off this bend, and there in the ditch. He was right at the head of the field here. A very nasty fall. This is him now. He does look to be basically okay. His nose is bleeding though. That's really sad, because Laurens ten Dam was having a great Tour de France, and it's another slice of bad luck for the Rabobank squad, this, because there's the medical straight into him. This is the descent which Jonathan Borders had just warned his riders about on the descent there. He overshot the corner and out. That was a very, very nasty, heavy fall there, as he went straight over the handlebars when he lost control off that right-hand bend. They come down these climbs so fast, and that was really a very, very heavy fall for Laurens ten Dam. I would suspect he's got a broken nose, and I doubt he'll be allowed to continue that. This is the leader who's safely away from all of the problems just now, Gorka Izagirre. He's made his attack on the way down and has pushed quite a way away at the moment. He's being chased by Marcato, although I haven't seen him at all. The cameras haven't picked him up. Our computer says he's chasing. Now they're saying there are 10 riders chasing him at 29 seconds. Here we go, up to the top of the Port de l'Air, the third category climb. Only the first 2 riders get points in the King of the Mountains, but for Izagirre, he gets the most, which is 2. And as they go over the top, 117 kilometres covered. We have 50 kilometres just over now to go to the finish. He wants the newspaper. There he gets it straight up his jersey. And he begins the descent now. And it's a long, long way to the valley below before we start the climb out of that valley to the top and the finish line.
You might just notice the flags there rippling in the wind. Well, it's a headwind the riders have had up this climb. It'll be a different story once we start to get up here to the high spot today of the Plateau de Bay. It's a nasty climb. It's twice as long almost as the Col d'Agnès, and it's almost exactly the same gradient. And O'Grady sitting on the front there, Phil, riding in his own little world there, just riding to make it hard in the Tour de France today, to toughen up the race for everybody else. The best way to ride a race is to make it hard, so then your leaders can take over once you get towards the summit. This is Chavanel looking for a single point, and he's going to be challenged by Chateau.
Chateau's got his own back, has he? No, Chateau is in third, so it is Chavanel who is moving up steadily in the King of the Mountains classification. But I think we'll be keeping the same leader tonight. It all depends on the actual result at the finish, because he carries 40 points. And if Sanchez is in the mix there, it'll change again.
Well, if Sammy Sanchez finishes in the top 5, we will see a big change in the King of the Mountains points at the end of today. So
now just watch this and just have a look at this. Our camera's caught this. Watch the back wheel. He's realised that corner was a little bit tighter, and he's used the whole length of his road and just about avoided sliding down that crash barrier like Levi Leipheimer did in the first week of the Tour, approaching the finish. He's taken a few chances down here. Now the peloton themselves are going to have to watch that. They won't get such a clear view of it. But it just shows you the risks this man is taking. He knows you can gain on the downhill just like you can gain on the uphill. This is a long descent, a long way down here now. As we race into the valley, we're descending off 1,517 meters. We go down to 535 meters. So we descend now 3,500 feet before we start the climb back all the way up to the top again of the Plateau Bay. This is Izagirre, just wisely eating while he can, but he's got to use both hands to get round this one. Well, some 3,000 feet of descending now, Paul, and again he's taken that corner extremely wide. He is taking risks on the descent, but as you know, there's a crash here now. Is that Jens Voigt?
It is Voigt.
It looks like it is.
Well, he's got on his radio very quickly there, Phil, just to let them know that he's had a crash, and he's probably asking for a new bike. He looks calm and collected. Let's just have a look at how that happened.
Well, this is like the crash on the Grand Saint Bernard. He's gone off the edge there. If you remember, Jens Voigt was the rider in 2009 that crashed on the Grand Saint Bernard and went skidding down the road on his face. And fortunately, there's hardly a mark on his face. He's totally recovered, and he said, I couldn't leave the Tour de France with those memories. Well, he looks okay. I think he's cut his arm, but basically he's got away with it.
He had a bad line coming around that corner. Should have been a little bit over to the right-hand side to make the sweeper across to the left, but maybe he was too close to the rider in front. He got a reasonably soft landing there, Jens, and he's quickly back up on his bike, and he'll be joining the front end of the peloton, I would expect, and now he'll become a serious gun now to the Schleck brothers on the chase down towards the finish.
Well, it looks as though he's okay as he rides on. He'll take it easy now. The pressure's off. He can't catch up with that breakaway down these hills. He'll probably just freewheel at his own speed, and as he approaches the start of the plateau, he may find he's got company of his teammates. But it just shows you these corners are so sharp in this region, and as you can see, they're unprotected. Thank heavens that was only a little gentle stroll through the bushes rather than off the mountain. The battle is who is going to attack when we get to the Plateau de Bay.
Well, they will attack when they get into the first 7 or 8 kilometers to go, because I tell you one thing, it's extremely steep at the bottom.
Look at this swing around this bend here. They just wind out of these corkscrews one after another. We've seen riders peel off. It's like watching a western half of the day, isn't it? You see the riders just fall off into the grass as they continue. They just bounce back. Laurens ten Dam has got back on his bike. He's chasing alone. His face is bandaged. What incredible athletes they really are. The boys in black still being led by Stuart O'Grady. When we get to the next climb, he is going to peel off and his day will be done, because there's no way he can go up That is one of the corners where Isagor took the whole crash barrier. They happily have come round it okay, but they were very close even so to that crash barrier. And O'Grady just looking over his shoulder, checking what might be happening behind, slowing everybody down, a very cautious, wise man. Stuart O'Grady has broken just about every bone in his body in cycle races, and he comes back. He calls himself the Bionic Man, and he's gentlemanly slowing down the riders if he sees a reason to do so. Whole field swinging off the back. It's actually growing in size again, that peloton, as the riders rejoin after the climb of the Col d'Agnès. They seem to be able to handle the Porte de l'Herbette. It was only a third category mountain. Back up with the leader now, Isagor. And the Orange boys at last are in their playground. And after all of the pain of the last 4 months, and another crash here, this is Jens Voigt again. Oh my goodness me, he cannot believe this. Waving his hands in disgust, he comes around this corner. Oh, and he hit the job. Maybe just the heat of the road there, slipping on the tar. That was a nasty thump here. And he's on his own there. They had no real reason for that. This guy doesn't believe the way the world is treating him. I couldn't hear what he was saying. Maybe you could, but I hope the language is clean, because Jens Voigt very, very annoyed with himself here for the way his luck has turned around in just about 10 minutes of racing. No longer with the leading group. The peloton are closing in. He was 2 minutes 38 behind the leaders when he just hit the road again for the second time. You have to be careful. These corners on the Tour this year seem to be catching riders out all of the time. I don't think I can recall so many crashes, especially between 10 riders. They're 1.5 minutes behind Gorka Izagirre at the front, and that's about the state of play today, Paul. It's going to be all down to the battle of the Plateau of Baille.
Just having a quick look here, just going off the back end of the peloton. The back end of the peloton has had a lot of guys being left behind. This is Thomas de Gendt going off the back here for Team Vacances Soleil. What has happened is, I think a little bit earlier than I expected to, Leopard Trek started to set a very infernal tempo on the main field, and a lot of riders were getting eliminated in 1s and 2s on the first climb that we started to go up, which was a very nasty little climber, the Col de la Trappe. But then on the Col d'Agnès, they really started to put the hammer down, and the race not only in the breakaway split to pieces, but also in the main field too.
Well, currently, as we look at these pictures, these riders are descending at 85 kilometers an hour. That's 53 miles an hour. They look as though they're hardly moving, but that's how fast they really are going. So when they do overshoot these corners and fall off, it must be very painful indeed.
No, but you've always got to hope that when you're going to crash, that you remain in control of the machine for as long as possible, because so you can actually hope to try and pick where you're going to put your body when you land. And I have to say, Jens Voigt, the first crash, he was very fortunate. He had a fairly soft landing. The second one was not quite so fortunate, because he landed very hard on the tarmac.
Well, this is life at the back when you're the television cameraman trying to rejoin through the cars here. There's lots of encouragement for the leader now, because he knows exactly what he's got to do to get to the front. Thomas de Gendt, I think, has just got back on. He won the stage of the Tour of Switzerland.
Well, we've actually switched back to the second group on the road. Yeah, that was Sylvain Chavanel in this group, and also very dangerous. I think Anthony Charteau could be a serious ally later on once we get into the final climb of the day for Thomas Voeckler. The reason you try and get into a breakaway like this early on, especially if you've got a teammate who has a chance of winning the Tour de France, is to hope to get to the final mountain of the day with a slight advantage, with a view to being able to help your team leader.
Well, 5:15 to the one leader who made his move on the descent of the Col d'Agnès. He's increased it now, and he's looking as though he might get to the foot of the Plateau de Baille and try to scurry for the finishing line. Gorka Izagirre at 5:15. We have 11 riders grouped up behind him, and they're closing in at 40 seconds behind. They're the original breakaways. We think Jens Voigt, who's fallen twice, is still ahead of the peloton, and then comes the peloton at 5:14.
Yeah, as they're seconds ahead of that 11-man group, but I'm not surprised, Phil, that he went downhill quite as fast as he did, because when he was a junior, he was the national cyclocross champion of Spain. That was back in 2003.
Well, the shortest way down the mountains is across the fields, but I hope he doesn't decide to take that route today, as Lance Armstrong once did, racing into Gap. 5 minutes 12 seconds, 34, just over 20 miles now to the finish, and it's now the turn of Fabian Cancellara to take up the pacemaking for Leopard Trek. So finally, some would say, Stuart O'Grady has had to give up his position at the front here, but take your hats off to him as he now gives place to his teammate. I'm just looking down here at this. This is David Miller here, who's rejoined this little group. And also in this group is Kinziato. They're still up front, these boys. Miller hasn't gone back to the main field. This is the chase group of 11 riders, and I think these 4 coming up, it might swell. These 5 coming up could swell the size of this chase group. They're closing in too on Igor Izagirre, Gorka Izagirre rather. They are now only 35 seconds behind. We'll take a break. The big mountains ahead.
The guy who was in 8th place at the start of the day, and he's looking for his team car, obviously wants to get something sorted out, Phil, before we get to the climb of the Plateau de Bay.
Well, as we peer through the windows here of the Chateau de Miglos.
Yeah, formerly belonged to the Counts of Foix, which is not too far from here.
Now just looking at this here, now they still haven't caught Izagirre, but he can only just be around the corner the way they're throwing one attack after the other. Everybody trying to reach the leaders here with a move or the other. David Miller, this is Rui Costa, who has dropped. He came back. Miller, who was also dropped, has come back to the pacemakers again. Now, meanwhile, ploughing the lone furrow up front, 25 seconds ahead after 4 hours and 10 minutes of cycling is Izagirre. But look at this now, the men in black are getting down to it again now, and even on the flat roads here, peeling off the front is the flat champion, and he's gone into 2nd place now. This is Fuglsang here at the front. Jakob Fuglsang is their big workhorse now, giving it a strong turn at the front. All these boys in black want to do is to deliver 2 men on their team to the bottom slopes of the plateau, and they're both brothers, and that's Andy and Frank Schleck. So that's all their job is. Their race, their tour today could end when they get into the last 16 kilometers of the day and let the team leaders get on with the job in hand, which is at the front of the race and not about the favourites. But it's about to change, I think, now. They just swept up the Spanish rider Izagirre. The breakaway is now 17 strong. And as I say, that Sylvain Chavanel is trying now. We are heading towards the start of the climb. We're still a little way away. We're in Tarascon at the moment. Champion of France now. I just said earlier, Paul, he was having his best day in his tour, and he obviously believes it too, because he's gone again. And if he can get a gap here, he would climb to the finish as winner.
Well, I'm not sure. If you look at the gap that's been demolished by Team Leopard Trek, they've taken it from 7.5 minutes over the last 30 kilometers down to 3.5 minutes. And having been in the breakaway for a long time, you can be sure that Frank and Andy Schleck, Cadel Evans, Alberto Contador, and of course Thomas Voeckler, let's not dismiss him just yet, can climb a lot faster than somebody who's been in a breakaway for the whole day.
Well, it is possible with 3:26 they could all come together at the base of the finishing climb. As we look down from the helicopter, the Euskaltel rider Izagirre has been picked up, and Sylvain Chavanel is attacked now from the front 17 riders of the original 24. In the race behind, we're now seeing the Leopard Trek boys of Fabian Cancellara closing in very, very quickly on the flat roads, approaching the last town before the climb starts at Les Cabanes.
Well, here you can see Sylvain Chavanel, Phil, was not getting away off the front end of the peloton, so he decided to sit up and wait for the rest of the group, while in the main field behind, talk about the Leopard Trek Express. And this is why I think they chose the name Leopard, because it's named after a German tank that was introduced into the German army in the 1960s. Still exists today. They're trying to smash everybody here into submission.
3 minutes 20 seconds, the Maillot Jaune group of Thomas Voeckler. As there's no cohesion at all in the 16 riders at the front. There'll be 17 when they catch Sylvain Chavanel. Everybody having a dig, and of course, as you see on the clock now, the peloton is racing at a consistent high speed, and they are beginning to chip away at that lead wholesaledly. 3 minutes 14 seconds, the peloton. There's still a lot of riders in this group too as they come towards Les Cabanes.
Well, there you can see Sylvain Chavanel. He's calling it a day at the Tête de la Course, the head of the bike race here this afternoon. It looks like Luis Leon Sanchez is coming across the gap, but behind in the main field, we can start to see The heads of state are starting to assemble. The main field was led by Leopard Trek, but queuing up behind them, Saxo Bank of Alberto Contador.
So Sylvain Chavanel waits for the arrival of both of, I think it's Luis Leon Sanchez, or is it Mollema? Well, there's three of them anyway. And looking here, Alberto Contador now, he's sitting behind the Leopard Trek Express train. He's right behind Frank Schleck, who took time out of him in the finish at Les Ardiden. He looks pretty cool at the moment, no problem just now.
I have to say, he looked very cool there, getting himself into his tuck aerodynamic time trial position. Life at the back for David Arroyo, not enjoying his Tour de France. Started off with a number of accidents and tried to nurse them through the first week of the race. Thomas Voeckler for the first time moving a long way down. You can see the yellow jersey there in about 25th position.
The tenacity of this chase group of 14 riders has made it 17 again, and as no sooner could I say that, and we have an attack again. They are approaching now the start of the climb of the Plateau de Bay. Well, they will not allow this breakaway any peaceful moment at all. Or Ruben Perez now, another rider on Euskaltel Euskadi, who's just been caught, has decided he's not waiting, he's off again to try and bring victory to the Basque team. Remember, we climb almost into Spain, we stop short, but the Spanish get a lot of support in this part.
No, they certainly do. Lots of Spanish supporters out on the course this morning as we drove up. Plenty of Basque flags and plenty of orange jerseys. They're here to support the men in orange just over to the right-hand side there. And the man with the golden helmet and the dark golden glasses, that is Sammy Sanchez. He could be a danger today, filling 8th place in the overall and looking to try and move up higher.
The town of Bai 2011, that's the area. That looks like a giant bee on a bike there. Well, I think one or two of these riders could do with sprouting wings right now, especially Ruben Perez, who's trying to go away. They are racing in the peloton towards this town. This is Les Cabanes. They are racing here just like they were at the end of a bike race, because they want to get their team leaders into these narrow streets first. He's just going round, Paul. His legs almost clipping in the barriers here, Perez.
Well, Ruben Perez, he saw the fact that that group was coming back to him and said, well, I'm not having any of that. I want to be the first man onto the slopes of the Plateau de Bay this afternoon.
What a super crowd here at the base of the climb. Just look at this. There it is, 15.8 kilometers to the top of the Plateau de Bay, and it's a Spanish rider who gets there first, Ruben Perez. The rest of the breakaway are snapping at his heels, and dare I say, the peloton is not too far behind, snapping at their heels. This is going to be an amazing climb. Now here comes Fabian Cancellara. His job will end as soon after we get through that town up front. Sandy Cassar leads the way. Well, this is it, Paul. Sandy's making the run for the summit now, and I wouldn't bet against that happening. And 2:04 is his advantage at the base of the climb. Maxime Montfort sets the pace. Ivan Basso in those lime green shorts over to the left. He said he will distinguish himself before he gets to the Alps. And he's right there, right in the centre of our picture, is Andy Schleck, looking calm and checking out who is with him.
But Sandy Cassar is the man who leads. He's being chased out on the road by a small group of Luis Leon Sanchez, Christophe Riblon and Xavier Zandio. Sanchez is the orange jerseyed rider from Rabobank, looking over his shoulder saying, whoa, this climb is extremely difficult. Looking over his shoulder there, trying to help his team leaders. We can see one of the riders from BMC looking for Cadel Evans, dancing over to the right-hand side in the yellow sunglasses. Alberto Contador does not look like a man in difficulty just yet.
Well, this incredible man, Jens Voigt, is taking a handful of select riders into the zones that most professionals cannot ride in. And it's blowing the breakaway up the road is completely shattered now. They are climbing one-on-one. There are approximately 16 riders in front of the peloton, and they've completely split up. Alberto Contador is tucked to bottom left of the peloton. Cadel Evans is looking seriously good on the right. He too is keeping the mask on, not telling anybody whether he's feeling the pace or not.
Well, the yellow jersey of Thomas Voeckler is protecting his position fairly well. Thank you for the moment. There he is, sitting alongside Cadel Evans. Jens Voigt is actually riding everybody off his wheel with the power that he's throwing at this race. While Vladimir Karpitz, well, he's off for an early shower.
Former Tour of Switzerland winner drops away from the action. White jersey winner of the Tour de France as well. David Miller is the next rider to be swept away by Jens Voigt. The last time David may have seen Jens was off the side of the road when he crashed in the breakaway. He must be amazed that somehow Jens Voigt can produce this power at this stage of the race. He has been in the lead all day and he's crashed twice and he's still riding at the front.
Well, he doesn't care, Jens. He's such a powerful man, as you said, Phil. He's got a massive heart and he's got massive power in those legs. He will just ride. He's just riding as hard as he can at the moment to make it very difficult for everybody else. But while one by one riders are being eliminated, this is the leader of Soor Sojasun, and that is Jérôme Coppel.
And the great French hope for the future as well. But right now, he's a little bit too young for this power, coming from the oldest man in the race, almost 40 years of age. On the right-hand side, also dropping there, Nicolas Roche has gone as well for the moment. But now we've got Peter Velits of HTC, the rider in white. He's their best hope for a high finish too. He's there. And to me, Thomas Voeckler at the moment in yellow is handling this 100% to the good.
He will count every kilometre that goes by, Thomas Voeckler, and every kilometre that goes by, and he's still in contact with the big leaders of the Tour de France, is a bonus for him this afternoon. David Arroyo finally has managed to move to the front. We talked about the weakness of Alberto Contador's team, but he's still got, Phil, 3 teammates in this group alongside him.
And
Van der Velde now coming to set the pace making on the front, Phil, in the white jersey of Garmin Cervelo. Other teams coming forward, but it's going to be a waiting game, and this is a very difficult climb. You can't attack at the bottom because you can put yourself into the red zone or start to get asphyxiated. If you do that, you'll never recover again on this climb, and you can lose yourself 5 minutes in the blink of an eye.
But what is interesting to see here is that even though they're frightened to death of Leopard Trek and its obvious strength with the Schleck brothers, they're not afraid to attack them as they have done all day today. And look at this now, a change at the front. Garmin Cervelo, who can't do a thing wrong in this year's Tour de France. Christian Van der Velde is giving his all now for Tommy Danielson right there in second wheel. And look at Tommy Voeckler getting in on the action. Okay, where's the Schlecks now?
Well, just wait. There's a long way to go to the top of this climb, Phil. The reason that the Schlecks team came up and hardened the race up was because they're waiting till they get till 4 or 5 kilometres to go. But this is a great show of defiance by Garmin Cervelo and Christian Van der Velde.
Well, these boys now have been cracked, slipping away. This is Luis Leon Sanchez, and up there alongside him is David Arroyo. They slipped through and behind this breakaway. It is an amazing race, this, and there's no obvious strongman left in the Tour de France. We've seen and expected the attacks of the Schlecks at this point. This is not the same as the climb of Luzardiden. There's a lot believe they can win today. Well, just take a look at this now. Jonathan Porter's in that team car, must be beside himself. The team has made something out every day in this race. Yesterday they got the victory with Thor Hushoff. They won the team time trial. And now Christian Van der Velde has completely refound himself this year after his 4th place in the Tour de France. And Tommy Danielson looking around, absolutely 100% confident, doesn't recognise any reputations whatsoever. He's here for a high finish in the Tour. And I would be a little concerned if my name is Andy Schleck, because it doesn't look as though he can control this at the moment. He's dropped away with brother Frank. Same must be said of Alberto Contador. While in the red and black jersey there, Cadel Evans, the other big favourite, doesn't look to be under any pressure at all. It's a very strange Tour de France just now, but it's the best one to have. It's very, very exciting. So we're relying on 2 Americans on the front. And take a look too of the yellow jersey pouring water over himself. Have a look in the car. Andy Schleck is still in there, but he's lost all his friends now. The team has gone from around him. Now there's the first attack coming again from Astana. And going off the back here is the young white jersey of the Tour there, Janson of Française des Jeunes.
Well, these are the first little skirmishes, and you can see the power that Christian Van der Velde has got this afternoon. He just raised the tempo a fraction and brings himself back to the wheel of the Astana rider. All over his bike, resplendent in yellow, and still not looking like a man who's going to crack this afternoon is Thomas Voeckler. The race situation, Phil, Sandy Cassar still leads this race by 51 seconds from Riblon and Zandio. Then 2 more riders a bit further back at Izagirre and Chavanel, and then a little bit further back at 1:22, Carlos Barredo.
And this is Silin, who's just been brought back into the group. He was up front. He's had a very good day out in the mountains, but now he's been brought up. as he looks back to see how many is there. They're calling back the team cars. That's for Ribland's team cars being called back as well. Here is the leader, and just look at this now. This is an attack coming from Andy Schleck, and Contador is immediately on his back wheel. Now it's up to the rest.
Well, now I think you understand why Team Leopard Trek went out and toughened up the race here this afternoon, because they wanted to make it difficult for everybody else. Yes, they've isolated themselves, but they've also isolated all of the other leaders of the Tour de France. It looks now as if Christian Vande Velde, job done, is sliding backwards.
Right, we've got Andy Schleck, Alberto Contador, Cadel Evans, Frank Schleck, Thomas Voigtler, and the young Belgian hope there, Van den Dert, also jacked onto the back. There he is. Pierre Roland has come up, Sanchez has come up, Cunego has come up, and there was one rider I missed there, but Basso has come up as well.
Well, Basso has said that he wants to show through the mountains here. You can see Daniel Navarro, Saxo Bank going backwards. This is the explanation as to why Leopard Trek set such a difficult tempo throughout the early part of this race. They want all of these riders, Phil, hardly have anybody alongside to help them.
Well, that attack actually dispatched, as you say, Van der Velde, but it also got rid of Tommy Danielson. They're just coming back now because they've eased the pace here while they reassess what's happened in the distance on the white jerseys of Garmin Cervelo.
Well, they need to attack again if they want to get rid of Thomas Voigtler this afternoon, because he has got a teammate alongside him. The rider in the green jersey in first position there is Pierre Roland. He's the man who nursed him up to the top of Luz Dardiden.
10 kilometers to go, and Sandy Cassar goes under that banner. He's a minute 22 seconds ahead of the main yellow jersey field, which is down to about 12 select men here. This has been an incredible attack. Pierre Roland is riding just off the front foot. He's looking for the whereabouts of Tommy Voigtler. 10 kilometers still to climb, right to the line. Voigtler is there. All of the mentioned names are here. There is no one missing. Basso, Cunego, Frank and Andy Schleck, Alberto Contador, Cadel Evans, Damiano Cunego, Tom Danielson. These riders are all in this group. Now it's Chavanel who has been caught, and this time a second attack from Andy Schleck, and this time it is the amazing Belgian rider Van den Aert who has got onto his wheel first.
Cadel Evans responds. He sees that in the red jersey. He knows you can't let Andy Schleck go away on the slopes of a climb like this. Andy Schleck around that corner as if he's going on the flat, and he opens up a big gap. Cadel Evans has got the yellow jersey of Thomas Voigtler locked onto his wheel. The man behind that is Frank Schleck. But where is Alberto Contador now?
Well, he looks over, he sees Evans, he's scared of Evans, he thinks he's the man he may have to beat if he's going to win this tour. Evans has come right across the gap. The man I'm interested in now, Paul, is Van den Aert. In his first Tour de France, he sat on Andy Schleck, and he's closed that gap, no problems at all. Cadel Evans is now in third place. They go under 10 kilometers to go.
Andy Schleck has led the charge there, but Alberto Contador, number one, has responded and come across the gap. You might have noticed Frank Schleck looking into his eyes there, trying to figure out if there is any signs of weakness.
But take your hat off to little Thomas Voigtler here. The yellow jersey is still alongside the front runners in the Tour de France. He is now 9.4 kilometers from the top. We're about to pull back here. Xavier Tondo and Christophe Riblon. We're chipping away at all the men in front. When they catch those two, there's only one, Sandy Cassar.
Well, they need to attack again. Ivan Basso pulls himself back, and so too Damiano Cunego, so too Sammy Sanchez. They're all wondering what is going on in this group. When will the fireworks happen again? Well, just to let you know that the climb gets extremely steep at around about 5 kilometers to go, because it kicks up once again to the 10% margin. They've all been marked so far, but wait till we get to the steepest part of the climb. Here's another move by Andy Schleck. And look at Thomas Voigtler. He wants to go with that one.
Well, you get 3 times to attack, they used to say, and the third time it doesn't work, you won't find any more. And so this time Schleck has gone again, and the maillot jaune of the Tour de France has gone onto his back wheel. Now comes the reaction from Cadel Evans.
Evans could see that. He was hoping that Ivan Basso was the man that was going to nail back that gap, but Basso had a lot of pain coming into his legs, and he realized it's important. Cadel Evans assumes control now. He's got Sammy Sanchez on his wheel, and Alberto Contador is still there in contact.
Well, you've got to admire the style here of Andy Schleck. He's trying everything. Now he checks over and he sees them all come back. He eases back off those pedals again. The big surprise here, without doubt, is Thomas Voigtler, but Cadel Evans has marshaled that. Watch out for Sammy Sanchez on the right here, has moved smoothly up. Voigtler feels as though he's in a world of his own here. Everybody is throwing stones at him as they try to rob him of that yellow jersey.
quite right, Phil. Watch out for Sammy Sanchez, because they might not regard him as a serious threat, and in 8th place overall, they may well give him a little bit of leeway. But Ivan Basso, as a seasoned campaigner, knows that when you've got a tough race like this, you've just got to keep that energy going, you've got to keep that cadence going. Otherwise, other riders who are under pressure have a chance to recover and stay in contact.
The Danish flag flies as we now look at this group of 12 riders, and Tommy Danielson is coming back to this group. He's fought his way back because they've slowed down, and that's a good ride. He's the best placed American. He sits 10th overall at the moment.
Well, only one rider missing from this group, Phil, out of the top 10, and that is Philippe Gilbert, the Belgian national champion. He went off the back very early on the slopes, so Nicolas Roche also has disappeared. Tommy Danielson will be moving back up into 9th place tonight if we were to stop the race as it is here.
Absolutely right. And so the pace is slowed down. Pierre Roland has got control. To think of the yellow jersey, with every turn of those pedals, Thomas Voigtler is getting himself another yellow jersey tonight. It's going to be very hard for him to lose the lead now with the time that's left. There's 7 kilometers to go for Sandy Cassar, and he's pushed on a little bit because they slowed down, you see. Sandy's now gone out to 46 seconds.
Well, I think he's waiting to see if Alberto Contador gets boxed in. That's the move he's waiting for, and his brother's with him.
Here he goes. It's the Schleck 1-2 now. Now they've all got to go. And Contador, no problems. He just has a few deep breaths, kicks again. And Cadel Evans, you'd think he was finishing the stage the way he sprints there. He also comes across the gap, and Voigtler is onto him.
Well, the power of the Schleck combination there, you might just have noticed Frank Schleck looked over his shoulder and he left the gap to make Cadel Evans be in the position that he had to chase.
You know, this is how it was last year when Schleck battered Contador and got absolutely nowhere. And now it looks as though we're in a similar situation again, as the Devil getting a lot fitter these days, almost keeping up with them. Schleck on the right. Contador has come right through, not looking like a weak rider at all today. Frank has got the left-hand side of the road where Van den Aert is.
Well, trying to claw his way back there. Ivan Basso, 91. Damiano Cunego, Sammy Sanchez, 21. These accelerations are going and coming back again, but it's Van den Aert.
Jelle Van den Aert is thinking he may have something the other boys haven't got here. I've never seen a Belgian climb like this in the days of Lucien Van Impe back in the late 60s, back in the 70s. Late 60s and 70s.
This is a good move by him. He's a long way down in the overall standings, and they may well just not respond to this acceleration as they continue to watch each other.
Well, Van den Aert really, they're not going to chase him. He's a long way down the overall, as you say. He's not part of the scene today. And so they're still in fighting for the next yellow jersey here. He won't get it as Van den Aert has made his move. He's 12 minutes 54 seconds down at the moment. And so they're not going to worry too much just now, but he could become a big feature in the Tour de France next week when we go to the Belgium. Van den Aert heads up to the back wheel of Sandy Cassar, and now there are 2 riders at the front.
Well, Van den Aert was a man who was so close to getting himself a victory at the summit of the Super Bessie climb the other day. He panicked a fraction on the way in, but he was beaten up to the line with the acceleration of the rider who beat him on that occasion. But this is a fine move by him.
Well, that's tremendous riding by Jelle Van den Aert, and it could be a yellow jersey one day. It wouldn't be today, as I say. He's 12 minutes behind overall. These two are just getting, are being allowed to go because the in-battle here is between this group, and it hasn't quite worked out yet the way of the big stars. There's a few riders fancying their chances in the Tour de France this year, not least Ivan Basso, and you've got to start counting Thomas Voigtler if he keeps up these shows of defiance.
Well, he's not looking like a man who's going to crack. He pushed himself extremely far on the finish to lose Ardennes, which was won by Sammy Sanchez. But here, he's on the defensive. He's moving, though, after every move. Alberto Contador, the signs for him are all over the road here this afternoon. He hasn't yet attacked himself. He's playing a defensive role. He may well be suffering a fraction, but he hasn't put a foot wrong so far. He's responded to everything they've thrown at him.
Well, got the advantage because he's lost the time so far. They're not directly attacking him. They want to shake each other off the wheels. If he gets caught, it'll be the momentum of the attacks to lose one another. Now is Frank going to have a go? No.
Well, that is the big advantage that Vanendert does have here, Phil. He is so far down. Sammy Sanchez is going for it now.
Well, this is what happened at Luzardi-Dem, but he beat Frank Schleck there, but Frank Schleck's not going to give him his head this time. Schleck goes on his back wheel, but he still persists.
Well, this is a slightly flatter part of the course, and Thomas Voeckler is digging deep now to make sure that he can ride his way across that gap. I don't know how many times he can recover like this and scramble onto the wheel of these attacks by the big heads of state.
Tommy Voeckler has gone back into third wheel there. Cadel Evans has come up. Contador has come up. We go under 4 kilometers to go. They've weakened a little bit Pierre Roland, the teammate of Voeckler, who's been dropped in that flurry of attacks. Sanchez has gone the second time, and he's caught Schleck out of position.
Well, Schleck said to Thomas Voeckler, why don't you go and chase him down? You chase me down, and there's going to be a little bit of a frayed expression now coming into this group. Sammy Sanchez could be making a good move here. He could be looking at another stage victory. He's got a bridge, though, 30 seconds to Jelle Vanendert.
Well, there's no reason for Voeckler to chase him yet. He's 4 minutes 11 seconds behind Tommy Voeckler. So Voeckler will keep concentrating on the men closest to him and gamble on the gaps that Sanchez is allowed to get. Sanchez is an absolute long-term danger. They can't let him go too far. Frank Schleck went out of position. Sanchez attacked. Cadel Evans is third now. This group is getting smaller, and riders are actually getting off the front.
Well, they are one at a time. We've got Jelle Vanendert leads this race. Seconds, but as you say, the most dangerous man to go away is Sammy Sanchez, the Olympic gold medalist and the winner at Luzardi-Den.
We're getting out of the forest, we're getting into the plateau, which lies high on the top of this beautiful mountain in the middle of the Pyrenees, and they haven't worked out yet how to get rid of one another. This is a real shoulder-to-shoulder fight to the death on the Pyrenean climb of Pla d'Aber.
Done everything they can do to negate the Schlecks, but now Ivan Basso may well get some freedom from this, because the Schlecks will say to the other guys in this breakaway, okay, you chase him down because you've been chasing us down as well.
And it looks as though we are able to chase. This is Perrault of the team AG2R, and we didn't expect him to be here at this stage of the race either, but he is chasing Basso. Basso is sitting in 5th place overall, 3:16 down. Perrault is a bit further back at over 8 minutes. But those two, as the in-fight starts, the market, and look at this, Tommy Voeckler has left the stars of the Tour de France, well, the projected stars of the Tour de France, and is going up to these other two with a face of pain. He is going up to these leaders. He is not going to lose his lead tonight. This rider is again riding like two men, and Cadel Evans is moving up on the crowd line. Evans has sensed there could be a problem here. This is going to be a push by Cadel Evans now, and if he's got some good legs, there's time at stake here. Cadel Evans is pushing away. That's the face of a man who wants to win the Tour de France this year.
Well, coming across is Andy Schleck, 2 kilometers to go. Thomas Voeckler, Alberto Contador, they are now really throwing everything at this race in the last 2 kilometers of the race.
And Andy Schleck is determined. He's trying to smile, but he's hurting just a little bit. He's wondering where brother Frank has gone, and that's the word. Frank has gone just now, but might be coming back. Cadel Evans has made a move. It hasn't worked, but it's hurt some riders. And it's put Basso at the back and on the defensive. Frank is just about got onto that one.
Well, Cadel Evans now, it's his responsibility to keep the pace going. Look at the face of Andy Schleck. It's not a smile on his face anymore. That's a serious grimace as he comes up alongside Evans. Voeckler has done, I would say, the ride of his life, comparable to the ride in 2004 when he kept the lead in the Tour de France on this very climb for 22 seconds. But he was a younger man then, Phil, an inexperienced rider. Today, he's riding with the strength of a long professional career, but also
a very different Tour de France, but there are 6 riders here who believe now they can win this race. Tommy Voeckler, he will begin to believe he can win this race. He'll need more time, of course. He's not the best time trialist, but Cadel Evans, if he keeps this group like this, he's going to fancy his chances as we go down into the Alps. He sits in 3rd place overall, his worst position since the race started. Basso has tried, it's failed. Now we've all gone back into the status quo. Pressure gone off again. The leader is looking for 1 kilometre to go, and here he is, the lone furrow now of a Belgian cyclist. I never thought I'd say that in this year's Tour de France, winning on the Plateau de Bay.
Well, the race situation, Van den Dert is leading Sammy Sanchez by 23 seconds, and the yellow jersey Alberto Contador group is at 58 seconds from the lone leader. But this constant acceleration and deceleration does nothing to their ability to eat into the advantage of the 2 men in front of them.
We're into the crowd barriers now, under 1 kilometre to go for the Belgian rider, Jelle van den Aert, who is on the Amiga Pharma Lotto team, who lost their team leader and potential podium finisher in Jurgen van den Broek as he fell and punctured a lung way back last week. And he went home, and this man has started to fly the flag for that team.
Well, second on the road, inside the final kilometre as well, 21, Sammy Sanchez. He could be looking at a lead in the King of the Mountains competition at the end of this afternoon. But this group here, Phil, the only riders to have really thrown serious punches at the other competitors were the 2 Schleck brothers, but they couldn't do it. They couldn't open up the gap.
And they've got Tia Youngster, and there's a long future ahead. First Tour de France, second mountaintop finish, first victory. And he is now going to move up the classification as well. He can't believe it. That is a real victory today for Jelle van den Aert. He also gets 40 points in the King of the Mountains. We'll have to wait and see if he pulls on the leader's jersey. He probably won't, because Sanchez will get also double points for second.
Well, this is a second group of Pierre Rolland doing an incredible job for Thomas Voeckler here this afternoon. Every time he's been dropped, he's come to the front and paced the yellow jersey. Sammy Sanchez, again, snatched a few seconds away from all of the other riders in this race, and he will start to climb that little bit closer up to a top 5 finish. He's lost 22 seconds on the leader, but Andy Schleck now powering away again.
Well, are they going to hope him, or is he going to open a couple of seconds on the line with a sprint finish? He's determined to get something out of the day's racing, and he's distanced everybody. He will get a different time to them, albeit by 2 or 3 seconds. That's a very determined finish of the stage as he looks back, and Cadel Evans races up to take 4th place behind him. He probably conceded 2 seconds.
Well, it was just a show of defiance to slap the other guys in the face to say, look, I'm still strong, and there's a long way to go in the Tour de France this week, and I'll be back. But for Thomas Voeckler, yes, that's a sign of victory. The victory for him is keeping the yellow jersey for another day.
Absolutely perfect show of defiance by Thomas Voeckler there, and he will most certainly be yellow tomorrow and lost hardly none of his overall time gains at the moment. He'll still be a great opportunist right here. Comes Tom Danielson fighting all the way, highest placed American. He probably moves up into 9th place even so, because Philippe Gilbert is not here. He loses just on 2 minutes there.
Well, there'll be a little bit of a shuffling around. This is Raym Terame, the leader of Cofidis. He'll be looking to get the lead in the Best Young Rider competition, depending on where Arnold Genesson finishes today.
This is Raym Terame coming up, the big hope of the French Cofidis team. Conceding, he never got into the breakaway when the move came, but he didn't lose that much climbing up by himself, only 2:23 as he crosses the line.
Yeah, but he was a second place rider in that Best Young Rider competition as they continue to battle up to the finishing line here.
And these are all the riders now popping in from the breakaway here. You can see how this climb has spread them away here, apart from that nucleus of the top names who refused to split up. Andy Schleck at the end getting just a few seconds. This is Haimar Zubeldia, the top hope, left on Radio Shack for a high finish. He's maintained a reasonably high position here as he comes home. Jelle van den Aert of Omega Pharma Lotto wins. Long day in the saddle. Samuel Sanchez second. A reversal of the finish at Les Ardennes. Andy Schleck third instead of Frank this time. Cadel Evans fourth. Rigoberto Urán in fifth. Alberto Contador 48 seconds, the same time as the yellow jersey Voeckler. Frank Schleck as well. Perrault did a good ride, didn't he? And Pierre Rolland also again finished alongside his teammate Thomas Voeckler, who keeps yellow tonight. We'll have a look at all that, and we'll interview whoever we can. See the presentations after this break. See you in a moment. In the case of Pantani, Armstrong and Contador. Will that be the case? He's got a bit of time to make up yet, Jelle van den Aert, but he's got huge mountains to come next week in the Alps. And he had a brilliant ride today up the Plateau de Bay. He gets his first win of his career, and it's here in the Tour de France at the very first attempt. There's all the power of the press looking on here. And he's smiling well here now because he's ridden defensively for his team, and now he got his chance to win for himself today, and he took it with open arms. He took advantage of the infighting between the projected leaders of the Tour, and they didn't react to him because they were too concerned with the whereabouts of each other. You know, who every day gets better and better. This is his 6th day in yellow, and tomorrow is a flat stage, so he'll have a week in yellow, just like Thor Hushovd did at least. He can't believe this. He's living through a dream. There's the congratulations at the back there by his teammate Philippe Gilbert as we cut back out on the stage here. But this is a day for Tommy Voigtländer. Some people are actually thinking he might be able to win this year's Tour de France. Well, nobody's been thinking that until now, but he's finished alongside the best men in the Tour de France today, who were expected to attack each other, and he never was once in difficulty. So perhaps Voigtländer keeps his same advantage over Frank Schleck, the same over Cadel Evans. Schleck behind, that's Andy, gets 2 seconds closer, up to 2:15. Ivan Basso is now there in 5th place. Basically, they didn't change. They all finished in the same gap. Samuel Sanchez in second, they climbed up a little bit with the time, 3:44. Contador holds exactly 4 minutes, gain, lost nothing. Tommy Danielson is in 9th. He climbed 1 place, although he lost a bit of time to those projected favourites. Nonetheless, he's still very much in the frame after a difficult day today. This is round the back of the podium here as Tommy Voigtländer starts to sign all the jerseys for the VIP. It's his 9th Tour de France, and it was when Lance Armstrong came to this place, the Plateau de Bay, and won here. Tommy Voigtländer fought all the way up to keep his lead by 22 seconds. And Armstrong said, when a man fights that hard, he deserves to keep it. And a new leader tonight in the King of the Mountains, because the winner today got double points of 40, and so Jelle van den Dert tonight gets the overall lead in the King of the Mountains. 2 firsts for him today, now pulls on a leader's jersey, and he's got 74 points, just 2 points ahead of Samuel Sanchez, who chased him home today. So they reversed the roles as to what happened at Les Ardennes. The Pyrenees are now behind the riders in the 98th Tour de France. They're now transitioning towards the Alps. They will come in after the rest day. Today we're heading to Montpellier, one of the most popular finishes in the Tour de France. And we go straight to the action today on Versus with these live pictures. Yes, the morning breakaway, although it did start in the afternoon, the race today is underway after 2 kilometres. 5 riders getting clear. These are names, Paul, we're becoming rather familiar with, and not least Mikel Delage, who's on the attack again, the man in our picture right now.
Well, I think if we were to stop the Tour de France right now, Phil, and give an award for the most aggressive bike rider of this year's Tour de France 2011, this man, Mikel Delage, would have to get it.
Well, if he stayed away all day today, he would have been in the lead in the Tour de France for nearly 450 miles in one breakaway or another, which is absolutely terrific racing. And dare we mention the fact he rides for Française des Jeux, the FDJ team, who have had a man in every move in the Tour. Well, this is the beautiful department of the Aude at the moment. It will change the Hérault. Now Philippe Gilbert, the champion of Belgium, just stalking the back of the pack at the moment. Mark Cavendish for the green jersey. He sits 3rd in that competition.
I would think he will look to the stage after the rest day on the road up to Gap, because it's a nice flat stage into Gap. Then all of a sudden the organisers have been mighty cruel, because they've put a circuit around the city of Gap with a very big second category climb in it, which will fall right into the kind of Belgian champion Philippe Gilbert.
He's been very proud wearer of that champion of Belgium jersey. First time he's won it in a sparkling career. As we just move around at the peloton here, routine for the riders at the back. This is the quick step rider, Nicky Terpstra. He's in the breakaway today with Mikel Delage, Samuel Dumoulin. He's a good sprinter, by the way, Dumoulin. He's won a stage in the past. Mikhail Ignatiev and Anthony Delaplace. In fact, Dumoulin is the only man in the breakaway to have won a stage in the Tour de France today. Lovely blue skies. We've had some strange sky formations all day, looking like tremendous rain, but at the moment it has gone away. Now it looks as though Philippe Gilbert is just going to change his shoes now, having, I hope, picked up a few tips from Thor Hushovd. the world champion. You might recall him changing his shoes the other day.
Well, the tip to pick up maybe is not necessarily how to get your foot into it, but in fact how to get the Velcro nice and tightened. These shoes, by the way, nowadays there's no such thing as shoelaces. That would be rather difficult to do on the ride, but most of them are strapped in with a Velcro type fastener, and some of the other ones have a binding very much like a ski binding that you turn up to tighten as the leather strap goes through.
Anyway, he's just about got it in now, and then he can start doing exactly what Paul just said. But most particular about the cycling shoes, cyclists especially, you might recall many years ago in the 80s, Greg LeMond always had his shoes specially made. And when he finished a very, very wet stage of the Giro d'Italia, he checked in at the hotel, and the little old lady that ran the hotel thought she'd do Greg LeMond a favour. So she put his very wet shoes in the oven to dry. And of course, being leather, they shrunk. And that caused an absolute panic in the middle of the night. And in fact, LeMond had another pair made before the morning.
In those days, it was very difficult, in fact, because most of the shoes that the riders had were handmade in leather by a very well-known cobbler up in Belgium. Nowadays, most of these shoes are made out of molds, and every rider has a particular liking for a specific kind of shoe. I think maybe, you know, once we start to get into the warm weather, the riders like to change their shoes. I remember racing with a guy by the name of Johan de Muynck, who actually won the Giro d'Italia. He had different shoes for different stages, for example, because it all depended on the position of his cleats. If his cleats were moved a little bit further back, he could actually ride with a lot more power. If his cleats were moved further forward, he rode with a lot more suppleness, and that was the position he would use for his cleats for climbing in the mountains.
Well, it's been routine at the moment for Philippe Gilbert. They have got off in the first hour to a very quick start. They've done 45 kilometers in the opening hour. They're picking up a cross-tail wind just now as they head towards Montpellier, running around with the Mediterranean on the right shoulders today towards the Camargue. That's one of the few areas of France where you will see flamingos, birds that one more associated with North Africa or indeed South Africa. But the game, we've seen regular changes, especially in that King of the Mountains competition, which has been great. But today there won't be much action in that because there's only one fourth category climb. It's not very far ahead now. It's the Côte de Villepasson, and that comes at the 82nd kilometre of the day. That's about 51 miles into the race. As we now wander around the beautiful department here, we've just come into the department of Hérault.
Yeah, we're just heading into the outskirts of Narbonne, which is a very famous Roman city in this part of the world. Narbonne goes back to the Roman times, but it was really the municipality that was opposed to Napoleon III before the fall of the empire in 1870.
Yes, we've had one or two memorable stage wins and stages into Narbonne. It's usually extremely hot at this time of the year, but I must say the weather has changed here. We are not in the heat of the south of France at all. We're in high winds, heavy cloud. I would call it pleasantly warm at the moment.
Just looking down there at the Archbishop's Palace there, just down in the bottom, it really is quite a magnificent backdrop. The architectural ensemble, as they call it, is extremely unique in France. The western facade overlooks a section of the Via Domitia, and it was a part of that was firstly established in the 13th century, and the old part of the palace was added onto by the Palais Neuf in the 14th century by the Archbishop, sold to the French estate after the French Revolution in 1842 for the what we call that €1, 1 franc at the time. The what's the word for settling a deal with 1 franc?
I don't know.
Oh, well, anyway, that's what they do in France.
That's going very well. Let's get back to the race. These are the 5 riders in the lead here. They got away the 2nd kilometre in. There's still a long way to go, of course. Now, you would expect the sprinters teams will try and control this breakaway. They're only 2:34 ahead. It's an awful lot of work being done, but they haven't yet got up to any gap worth having. Mikel Delage on the attack as always. They've got the small hill coming up. It only counts for 1 point in the King of the Mountains, so there'll be no changes there. We can expect Mark Cavendish and his HTC High Road team to be doing steady tempo at the back. But what this does do today for the yellow jersey team of Thomas Vauclair, the Europe car team, they can more or less take the day off, because the race is now for the sprinters snatching the stage prizes rather than have, as we've seen over the last 3 days, a race for the overall lead on time.
So you can just see the bands on his sleeves there, red, white and blue, the former champion of Holland. and a big all stalwart in Quick Step. This climb, short climb at 2.2 kilometers, maximum height 208 meters above sea level, which is about 650 feet, and the average gradient 4.6%. At the top, 111 kilometers to go, or about 70 miles.
So still a long way to go to the finish once we're over the top. That's why for the moment this gap will not concern the sprinters and the sprinters teams. It's struggling to hit 4 minutes. The wind is not terribly favourable. It's actually a crosswind, so that's making it difficult to break away today. The ideal wind, of course, would be tail, or tail to cross. There you see the crosswind on the French flag as we've gone through. It's coming in from the right-hand side and blowing in off the ocean, because we're skirting right around as we come round towards the Mediterranean now. Another stunningly beautiful and such a diverse section of France. We change on a daily basis in this ubiquitous country. We've just left the department of the Load, and there is Dave the Clean Bottle. I shouldn't tell you that because you're supposed not to spot it for yourself. And Hérault is the next county. Then we pass back into the Load and back into Hérault, where is the department we finish in today at Montpellier. I think it's the 30th time we've had a stage town here in Montpellier.
Just good looking down here. This is the small town of Gruison. It's a beautiful little town in the Narbonne area of France, right on the coast. And it's right on the Mediterranean. It goes back to the Roman times, where the first settlement came to this part of the world. But nowadays there's a 990 berth marina there. There's a lot of marine history here as well, and this is where you can find at the Marine Cemetery, which there's a commemorative to this cenotaph to a lot of the lost sailors from this region.
Yes, and there's a myriad of beaches right around the township there. A very, very good area too for Pasch's migrant birds, and we're not far away from the area where the flamingos live in the Camargue here. Incidentally, we've had lots of males. Those of you that spotted the vultures in the Pyrenees, in fact, I said they were Egyptian vultures. They weren't. They were the griffin vulture that we saw in the Pyrenees. Never seen so many before, but the Egyptian does live there as well. There's 6 to 8 breeding pairs. There's 4 different types of vultures fly in Europe now, which is terrific news.
Well, we're looking here at the young American rider, 22 years of age, TJ Van Garderen, riding at the front, learning a lot in his first participation in the Tour de France and banking a lot into his memory banks, Phil, for later on when he comes back to this race as a possible challenger for a high finish in the overall standings.
Well, this youngster in his first Tour de France has not been afraid of this race. He's ridden a solid Tour, which only confirms our thoughts that one day he will be fighting for a high overall finish in Paris. He said he came here to learn. He looks like an old hand at times in the Tour de France. He comes from Montana, a Bozeman, and I know that they're all cheering for him, but I have to say that he's looking like, as I say, an old hand in the Tour de France already. Here to help the team win stages, and so far Mark Cavendish has won 3. And maybe
one side, very interesting, was the tricolor of France. On the other side, they were flying the flag of the Occitane, and if you want to know what the Occitane is, that's basically the region of the Provence, and Occitane is formerly known as the Languedoc, or the Languedoc as it's now become, and it's a part of France, or the Provence, which stretched right across from Perpignan right into northern Italy in the old days.
Languedoc makes some terrific wines down here, white especially. Very dry climate normally, very hot and humid throughout the summer, but not the case today. There's the top of the climb, and oh well, that ruined the plan, didn't it? Mikel Delarge thought he was going to take it, but it wasn't to be. Mikhail Ignatieff just nipped the 1 point off the top. There he is. So he'll freewheel, wait for the boys to regroup. There's still 111 kilometers to go to the finish. The gap is hovering around about 4 minutes. So we'll take another break.
Into perspective a little bit, it was way back in the year 826 AD that Louis Le Pieux, or the Pious, allowed the Benedictine monks to settle on these lands, and the monk Durand, he built a monastery here which he dedicated to Saint Agnin.
Well, here we go as we leave the town of Saint-Chinion. Next stop will be at Pierreux, or we just passed nearby Pierreux. We don't go through the town centre. That is literally just down the road here. I think that might be it on the right, but we stay on the ridges at the moment, down over the left there. This is absolutely beautiful area of France again, in the department number 34, which is known as the Hérault. Well, at the moment, the stage is looking pretty routine. Early morning breakaway, although they started at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. 5 riders going clear after 2 kilometers. We're now 99 kilometres from the finish, but they haven't let them go, Paul. They're riding very fast in that peloton, limiting the attack to 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah, I think the reason is, Phil, that the sprinters realise it's the last chance until they get to Paris and the Champs-Élysées that they've got a chance of getting themselves a stage victory. It's extremely important today for Mark Cavendish to try and get some more points in that competition, because over the next few days, as we take our little incursion into the Alps, he will have a hard time getting any points at all. Just quickly notice there, that was the windmill of the rock that we just went past, waving by as the riders start the descent. And if you're into geology, by the way, there's a lot of limestone outcropping in this part of the world.
And that windmill actually sits on the limestone cliff here, restored fully in the year 2000. As you can see, it was in pretty good working order. Now we're coming off the top of the limestone rocks at the moment as the peloton's descending now down into the town of Saint-Chinian. The breakaway's just gone through. There is an enormous crowd waiting for the Tour today as they pass through this town. And the peloton itself is holding on to that lead, which is now out to just over 3 minutes. Now, a familiar sight at the front, HTC High Road, the team of the green jersey of the Tour de France, Mark Cavendish. Obviously, the order's gone out not to allow this breakaway out of reach. It is a difficult wind at times today. The race could split under the pressure, so they've got to be a little bit cautious in HTC High Road if they want to take Mark to the line. And we don't know, of course, how he's come through the Pyrenees, where, you know, he's a sprinter and he gets a bit of a battering in those high mountains. And today it might have blunted his legs a little bit, but I get the feeling, Paul, it won't be the case.
Well, I think
The beautiful castle of Margan, which was built in the 13th century and looks absolutely perfect condition as well. Back to the race now. The peloton are about to come through the feeding zone where the leaders have passed through just a couple of minutes ago. Chance for a chat here between Lars Bak and Bernard Eisel. Now, the little card he's got in his hand there, that is a card with the complete race profile on. Well, it's pretty flat today, the profile. I don't know if we can show you the profile of the route he's actually studying at the moment. This is what he's seeing. And there it is. He'll see 4. We're over that. He'll see the knife and fork. Oh, that's where we are now, he'll say. Now we're heading for the green S, which is where the sprint of the day will be held before the finish, down at sea level virtually in Montpellier. That was Bernard Energy working together like that. Over the River Orbe, which is a beautiful river. Another stunning shot here in the Tour de France as we cross the Orbe River. We're in the Orbe Valley now. I didn't take too much intelligence to explain that. From the river coursing down the valley. 2 minutes 52 seconds, 84 kilometers to go. The peloton are really going very quick. Just look at the length of the peloton today as they stretch out.
Incredible bridge there, just going over the River Orbe there. It was a suspension bridge which was built in 1931 and 6.8 meters wide. Looking at HTC, Phil, yes, they've come to the front, so they're getting themselves organised. They've got the same tactic they've adopted over a number of stages. Danny Pate in second position now, Lars Bak setting the tempo, but they're actually got this 5-man breakaway pegged. They're not eating into that advantage.
Now, seeing HTC at Merviers-les-Béziers, where we just arrived, Paul, we're seeing that the HTC High Road boys do all of the work. Now, that's because Cavendish is on the team, but wouldn't you think someone would give them a hand? People like Tyler Farrer's team or
Omega Pharma Lotto
team?
Yeah, well, Omega Pharma Lotto, I just saw coming up on the race organisation website that Omega Pharma Lotto's team management have said, we're not going to go to the front. We're not going to help HTC High Road. I think it's a bit of a sad state of affairs, but you know, this has always been the case for HTC High Road. None of the other teams want to help them because they know the power of the sprint of Mark Cavendish. So they were quite happy to sit back, see them try and weaken the team and take advantage of that on the run in towards the finish. But I think that actually motivates HTC High Road. It's kind of, well, if you guys don't want to help, forget it. We'll get on with it and we'll still beat you at the finish.
Well, I suppose I can understand it. Cavendish is the fastest finisher over that last 200 metres, and if they put him in a position to win and they can't beat him, then why help him catch up with the leaders? But those two teams, Garmin Cervelo, Omega Pharma Lotto. Garmin has Tyler Farrer, the American sprinter, who's won a stage at Redon this year in the Tour. Andre Greipel, he's won his stage this year, first ever for both of them. Each time they've got to take on Mark Cavendish. He does make mistakes and the team makes mistakes, and if you don't catch the 5 leaders, then you're not going to even have a shot at winning the stage anyway. But I would have thought that those teams should have put 1 man at least up here just to show willing in the chase to catch those 5. Bernardo himself, by the way, had his birthday, his 55th birthday during the Tour de France. He himself rode 10 Tours de France, and he twice finished 6th, and he also finished 5th. He was a very, very good cyclist.
And he wore the yellow jersey in his first participation in the Tour de France when it actually went up into the Pyrenees. And he won a great stage in the Giro d'Italia when he got away with his teammate Bernardino. Jean-René Bernardo won the stage, and Bernardino went on to take the Maglia Rosa, the pink jersey of leadership, and win the event in the end.
Well, French sport of cycling is very pleased. He never lost interest when he retired. Instead, he stayed in as the management level, and the result is he rides today with his team man in yellow, and by the end of this day he'll still be in yellow and taking it to the second rest day. It was the day before the rest day last Sunday when Thomas Voeckler pulled on the maillot jaune.
Well, let's not forget about the 5-man breakaway off the front of the main field, and it's made up of these riders who got away after just 2 kilometers. Nicky Terpstra, the former Dutch national champion, who's on the front just now, followed by Mikhail Ignatiev, followed by Michael Delage, Samy Dumoulin and Anthony de la Place, and they're still holding on stubbornly to this 2-minute advantage.
Pretty fair. One of the officials here, and always got a smile for the riders as she shows them the timing board. Exactly 2 minutes, she was saying. Our computer's saying 2:05. And we've got 64.5 kilometers still to go here today. This is the town of Abelon. They'll stick to the guns. They won't surrender. They'll keep the pressure on. They know exactly what's happening behind. They know they've had over 3 minutes. It's back to 2:06. But they'll keep at it as they do daily. We've had the breakaways succeed now in the Tour de France. I'm not sure this is the day conducive for it, but we'll see. Sometimes the sprinters teams might start playing off against one another, and suddenly the chase turns off and the breakaway would win the day. We're seeing here now Team HTC. It looks like Team BAC have starting to drop away again now, but they're still on the left of the road there. As going on the 5 kilometers to the sprint, that's the breakaway. They're not going to be caught, so the major points will go to those. The peloton here will fight out 10th place, 6th place rather, for 10 points, and that's a big points situation because as we go into the last week of the Tour, there aren't many good sprint points for the sprinters. So as they continue to charge through the town of Pézenas right now, as the peloton down there, and another example of a massive crowd here who's enjoying the Tour de France. There's the town name, and it looks as though they've got a few candidates for their leaders' jerseys as the Tour unwinds. But right now, one leader's jersey at stake is green, and Mark Cavendish has called his team to the front to try and deliver him for the 6th place, because they're not going to catch the 5 leaders now. He needs 10 points, though. In
the small town area of Pézenas, formerly a stronghold of the Counts of Toulouse, I think all of the people from the Toulousan region have come down here, Phil, because this is once again a phenomenal crowd at the Tour. I don't think they're going to catch these riders. I think it's impossible to catch these riders, and I think that's what was adopted on board the HTC High Road Express there. They said, look, we'll start to see if we can pull them back. If we can do it easily, yes, we'll grab them, we'll go for the 20 points. If not, let's not burn ourselves out, because they know for Mark Cavendish to win stages, he needs the firepower of his team and a good long lead-out train in the run into the finish over the final kilometre. So they're probably going to sacrifice a couple of points.
Well, the nervousness today that we saw in the first week with all of those crashes in the peloton seems to have passed now. They've all got the adrenaline out of their system with 3 days in the High Pyrenees, and we haven't had any problems today, so fingers crossed. They're passing on the 5 kilometres to go. 1.5 minutes is the gap, so they won't bridge that in 5 kilometres. So Cavendish, though, will take 10 points because there's nobody up ahead that affects him in this competition. He will keep his eye out for the arrival of Jose Rojas, who has been sprinting well from day one, and also the phlegmatic Philippe Gilbert, the champion of Belgium, who go for anything. And he's also, watch for him, he comes up, he has a black top on his jersey, red and yellow. The Belgian flag is the design of his jersey because he's the current national champion.
Dumoulin just sitting at the back there, very good sprinter, winner of a stage in Nantes a couple of years ago, Phil, but not as a sprinter, actually on that occasion as a man who survived from a 3-man breakaway.
Yeah, but he had to beat the other 2, which he did with not too much difficulty, and there was an American involved in it that day, Will Fishgorn, who got second, I think, on the stage. But we're now looking at the breakaway here. I'm just wondering whether they'll race for it. But as we tell you every day, it's not just the points. There's also 1,500 euros available, which is around $1,700 or just over £1,000. Depends on the currency you work in. But there the peloton, the crosswind indicated by the Union Jack on the right as they come around that roundabout. Always love those pictures. And they all come back together again, and right at the front, still driving this ship, are the men in white for Cavendish.
Well, I'm so glad you said ship, Phil, because the other day somebody gave me a little bit of stick because they said it can only be called the Union Jack when it's out at sea, and it can be only called the Union flag when it's on the mainland. I'm not sure about that, but I'll have to check it out.
No,
well,
the Jack is the naval term.
Well, you did qualify it by saying ship.
Thank you very much. Just looking across again, the Romanesque wall that we seem to be riding over here at the moment. Looks like it's been there for a while, doesn't it?
The only problem is with my family's naval background, I always grew up with the white ensign.
I thought it'd just be a white flag, but never mind, as we're now seeing HTC High Road continuing to set the pace. Keep an eye on the green. You'll see how he moves around. You'll see how he peels his teammates off as they hit their limit and have to drop back. They want to keep the pace so high now that they make it virtually impossible for the other sprinters to get up alongside. But although that race is only for 6th place, that's the most important sprint here at this point. These are out of trouble, and you know, it looks as though we're going to be sprinting in the tree cover here, so that will negate the wind problem. Not the case when they come to the finishing line. The wind has gone from full-on tail to very slightly cross from the left now as we sit at the finishing line, so it's changing direction slightly. Now watch for number 133. He's the expert in the breakaway. He's been in enough of them. And Samuel Dumoulin, the sprinter who won in Nantes once and finished 4th on the stage to La Grande Motte, not far from where we are now, has just shown them how fast he is. But has he gone too soon as Mikel Delage inches his way forward? And it's going to be very, very close. Where's the line? It's probably, well, I think Dumoulin got it. Just pipped it on the line there, Samuel Dumoulin, but he misjudged that almost. He is the sprinter here, but Delage isn't amazing. He's the little one on the left there, Samuel Dumoulin. Well,
I think it was Delage.
I'll reserve on that one. We'll go to the photo finish. I hope they have a photo finish at this stage, right? I believe they do.
They do, because it's such an important sprint point, Phil. They do have a photo finish out on the course for this, because it could be this intermediate sprint that decides the wearer of the green jersey in Paris. At 46 kilometers to go, the gap has come down to 1 minute, and still a very long organised train. Look at Philippe Gilbert coming back up there in the jersey. Look at the acceleration going on the right-hand side, trying to get themselves maximum points for Mark Cavendish.
Well, this is what we expected, and it is in fact Rojas, Ventoso, and then Rojas has got the back wheel of Cavendish. Now they've gone up on the inside, they're taking Cavendish here. Rojas is on the right here, he's gone very wide, he's looking at the back wheel of Mark Cavendish. It isn't going to help. Cavendish just checking on the speed here, and they're coming up on him, and he gets the line. It was close, but I'll give that one to Cavendish. But again, they seem to misjudge the length of that sprint.
It was a long sprint, and they started a fair way out. Bernie Eisel coming across now. There's Matty Goss as well. The main field were not too concerned about contesting that sprint point. And it is amazing in this Tour de France, these new rules, how the sprinters are battling for everything. As we look at it from the sky, you can see there Philippe Gilbert. Those are the top 3 riders, Phil, in the competition. 1, 2, 3. Mark Cavendish, Rojas and Gilbert. And I think it's going to go like that all the way down to the Champs-Élysées.
So the point score for them is 10 for Cavendish, 9 for Rojas and 8 for Gilbert. Ventoso gets the 7, the teammate of Rojas. So he gained a couple of points over Gilbert and 1 over Rojas. I think he's more worried about Gilbert with the mountainous racing to come. Now there is the result in the photo finish, and it's pretty clear that Mikel Delage came up on the outside. Dumoulin went too soon, so our master of the breakaway has got himself €1,500 with that sprint.
Well,
Laplace on the front.
Well, just a quick look, and you know, once if the riders can get Phil safely through until 4 kilometers to go, then I think we'll have a very good sprint to the line. But it's as Bob Stapleton said, from kilometer 10 to go to 4 to go, there is nothing but a repetition of these traffic circles that France has managed to put almost at every junction that they can find in the southern part of France at the moment.
Well, Montpellier seems to be being rebuilt with the tramways that they're building there, as well as buildings. It's becoming a very modern centre. It's also one of the commercial capitals of Europe, not just of France. 27 kilometres to go now, and they're coming down so quickly here because the pressure is staying on. Another difficult bend to negotiate, and you see the yellow jersey at the bottom lost a lot of places there by going round on the outside. He went from the head of the peloton to midway Thomas Voigtler, and we'll probably see when we get another shot of it.
Yep, this is life at the back of the peloton. Well, 188, the man who was in the breakaway or on the cameras yesterday, Igor Silin, a very aggressive rider of Team Katusha, as well as Anthony Charteau, 182, and difficulty at the back.
27 kilometres to go. The crosswinds are now going to have their say in the Tour de France. Look at that Union flag down there as it rips across the roads of the area of Hérault. We're outside of Montpellier, and this is where the field could be torn to shreds by these crosswinds, especially if the sprinters teams and the leaders teams start riding hard on the front.
Well, this is why everyone was nervous this afternoon. You may not just notice the man who did a lot of work in the mountains, 182, last year's winner of the King of the Mountains, Anthony Charteau. He's groveling, and I mean that in the best possible way, to stay in contact with the main field, which is a very difficult thing to do. There could be a little bit of respite as they come through this small little village, the small village of Montbazin, but then once they go through the village and out into the open plains again, Phil, there'll be a lot of pressure on this main field.
Well, the leaders are also going to be under pressure. Here comes HTC High Road again, trying to keep control of that peloton and trying to keep Mark Cavendish out of the wind as best they can and in the position to win the sprint. Paul Sherwins has figured out that the last 4 kilometres might return to somewhat of normality, but they could split before that last 4 kilometres here, as Charteau goes round, last man in the long, long line of riders now.
Yeah, there's no consistency at all, Phil, between kilometre 8 to go and 4 to go. There's left-hand, right-hand, roundabouts, up and down and round the corners. It really will be a dogfight out there.
Looking down for the riders at 22 kilometres to go now, and that's all that's left of this year's Tour de France. We're in the town of Cournesec, and now they've started to split. They're getting desperate here, desperate moments, last gasp attempts to try and break away from the field. That is the Russian member of the squad here, Ignatieff, who's launched the attack, and these other 3 who are left behind, Delage, Dumoulin and Terpstra. It looks as though Delaplage is trying to reach him here from Seo-Séjour. Oh, it's the quick-step rider, so that must mean it's Niki Terpstra going now. Well, a quick reaction from Terpstra has brought him right up here to Mikhail Ignatieff. I think they had to do this.
A funny old game this, Phil, because we're actually talking about 2 former track champions. Niki Terpstra, former pursuit champion of Holland in the on the track, and also Ignatieff, a former Olympic gold medalist in the points race, but also world junior time trial champion.
Yes, I actually commentated on him when he won that Olympic gold medal, and he's got pure speed in those legs, but there's more money in road racing. That's probably why he came off the track. These are the 3 riders. It's being left here now to Anthony Delaplace, the first timer in the Tour de France, to try and get the other 2 Frenchmen across the gap. But they've been outwitted here by Terpstra, who's from Holland, and Ignatieff from the Russian Katusha team. 50 seconds, it's coming down quickly. These 2 riders dodging the crowd line, trying to quickly get out of sight and edge away now. They've got 8 seconds over Delage, Dumoulin and Delaplace, Niki Terpstra and Mikhail Ignatieff of Russia.
Well, these 2 riders have got firepower. They've got the ability and the speed to stay off the front end of the 3 riders who were with them, but they may well cause a little bit of consternation in the main field because they are the kind of riders who could survive over these last 20 kilometres.
Are 14 kilometres from the finish, and at 15 kilometres to go. In fact, the 3 riders who had dropped were swept up by the peloton. It leaves now only 2 riders out front, and 37 seconds is the gap. There's the catch. They surrendered to the men in white from HTC High Road, who just poured through there. Cavendish is the green jersey. They're trying to take to the finish. Now let's have a look at the finish. These are the 2 men now, 37 seconds at the gap. Niki Terpstra of Holland and Mikhail Ignatieff of Russia. Desperate scurrying for the finish. 13.5 kilometres, 37 seconds the gap. Danny Pate is driving the train now.
I don't know if you noticed that little bit of urgency there, Phil. Because the wind is coming from the left-hand side, they would do what the Dutch in the old days used to call à la weg, which means half of the road, meaning don't let anybody else get into our slipstream. We'll shelter ourselves from the wind and let everybody else scramble in the other part of the course.
Well, the Dutch were perfectionists at racing in the crosswind, especially with all the dikes in Holland, and it makes for very, very tough racing. It's not just the hills that will split up the Tour de France. if the wind is strong enough and the riders are strong enough at the front, they can break this race just as much as climbing a Pyrenean mountain.
Well, that was one of the...
I think, in fact, he's being marked, in fact, by Rojas at the moment, who's come through with his team as well.
And it looked very much as if Ben Swift was going to get himself in on the action this afternoon. The Sky rider, who's an extremely good sprinter in his own right, was also starting to line up onto the back wheel. But then when you notice the sprinters looking for Mark Cavendish's wheel, you can also see in the same gaggle of riders, you can see Cadel Evans, Andy Schleck, Alberto Contador. They're not there for the sprint. They're there to make sure they don't get involved in any accident or split in the main field as we run down to the final 10 kilometres.
TJ Van Garderen has now made a left turn right into the headwind here, so it makes it that little bit more difficult. There's Mark Renshaw, the best lead-out man in the business. He's got his position right in front of Cavendish in green. So they're the last two to go. It's up to Mark to lead Cavendish to the line.
Well, Geraint Thomas has also come up for Sky. Now, he will probably be the lead-out man for Ben Swift. The funny thing about Geraint Thomas is he doesn't know whether he wants to sprint for himself or sprint for somebody else. So I think in this occasion he will either look after Swift or Edvald Bosenhagen.
Well, take your hat off to these two, who are commentating like it is a group sprint already, but at the moment they are racing for third place. We look at the arch ahead now. This is 10 kilometres to go for the finish. Two low leaders, they're still there. They still have a chance. At 28 seconds is the gap. But once they get through these narrower roads in the finish, we actually come into nice wide roads into the city of Montpellier. The peloton has turned into a headwind, so that concertina has taken effect again. The clock is counting to 10 kilometres here for the peloton.
Well, it was about 30 seconds as they go under that banner. It's going to be about 25 seconds the advantage. Even Juan Antonio Fletcher coming forward there, completely bandaged on every extremity of his body, but still battling for the front.
You think he was auditioning for the Invisible Man with all those bandages on him, but in fact, poor old Juan Antonio Fletcher was the second rider involved in that accident with the media car a few days ago now on the road to Saint-Fleur. But at the minute, it looks as though they're trying to get their man, Geraint Thomas and Bosenhagen, up to the front as well.
Well, it's not supposed to get tricky until 8 kilometres to go, but here they're filtering off the big highway now, and they're going to circumnavigate the city of Montpellier and start to get a repetitive number of these very difficult roundabouts in France. Martin in those yellow glasses on the front to try and do a massive long turn. He can do that, but I think 8 kilometres to go is a long way out from the finish as we go around. Basically, we come off this freeway and back into the outskirts of town.
Well, thank heavens for helicopters as we see the leaders have gone through now, as the peloton are led now at the back. Danny Pate is last man in the race, having done so much work for HTC. And now it is up to the others to try and continue it. When you see all these riders going through our camera lens with bandages all over them, it really does make it look as though we've been to war rather than a bike race. But right now, these are the two, and a little rise here. And at this stage of the race, little rises feel like mountains.
They hurt a lot when you've been stomping a big gear in the wind, but these two men are experienced professional bike riders. Both of them have been champions of their country. One of them's been an Olympic champion back in 2004. They've got 16 seconds advantage. That is only 250 metres at speeds like this.
Well, thank heavens they barriered the road there, because had they split there like they often do, the left-hand split would have gone sailing off into some other parts of Montpellier. So they've made sure the peloton keeps right. That was one thing I was worried about out there, but they've done it well. As the peloton, though, has to squeeze into that narrower road, and it's gone a lot longer all of a sudden.
We'll talk about a distillery. A lot of riders getting decanted to the back end of the main field on that occasion, and they will never see the front end of the peloton again this afternoon. Still, this 22-year-old from the United States with the Dutch name, TJ Van Garderen. I don't know where he's getting this strength from, Phil, but he's battled himself back up to the front because he knows the guys need the extra firepower over the last 2 kilometres. Otherwise, they'll find themselves getting swamped.
13 seconds to go to the catch, and then all of the teams will want to try and break up that train of HTC High Road. Nicky Terpstra here, last year's champion of Holland, pushes on, and he's going to find plenty of help still to come from Ignatieff. Tony Martin is now the pace worker here, followed by Peter Velits.
Just spotted a new train coming up to the front, just over to the right-hand side, Garmin Cervelo, and it was their man Navadauskas who was trying to get their man Thor Hushovd, Julian Dean, and of course Tyler Forrer into their own little line on the left-hand side. Farah may well also be thinking of a crack to get his second stage victory in the Tour this afternoon, and he could very well easily get set up by Thor Hushovd.
Well, the Garmin Cervelo, they're the boys in the blue crash helmets, have certainly come forward in force there now. As we go down to just 12 seconds, we're going to see these boys make that turn very, very quickly here. But they're still resisting. We're looking for 5 kilometers. We've got 2 kilometers to go to that.
Watch these corners. These are very precarious corners. Lots of riders will be taking risks to make sure they don't lose their position in that line of riders. It's still under the control of HTC Hira, but all the other teams now are getting themselves organized. There are also, you can start to see the purple and blue jerseys of Team Lampre. A good opportunity for a man like Alessandro Patacchi here this afternoon.
Well, they're going to get caught just around 5 kilometers to go. These two riders will have survived in the lead for 187 kilometers today, and they're going to fall short by just 5. It's uncanny how these professional cyclists time this catch and at the same time plan the downfall of the other teams.
It's tough for HTC High Road and Mark Cavendish. He's still got 6 riders left, but how tired are they after doing all of the pacemaking? Terpstra has gone. All of a sudden, Ignatieff says, no, the legs are just a little bit too sore this afternoon. This is a last-minute burst. This is not a time trial. This is going to be an individual pursuit for Nicky Terpstra.
Well, he could do it. He's a very good time trialist as he now decides to give it one last shot here. The last survivor of the 5 men. The last show of defiance by a rider on Quick-Step who haven't won a stage of this race yet. As they continue now, this Belgian team using a Dutch cyclist to try and get the win. Remember, we've never had a French stage win either. And having lost their sprinter William Bonner yesterday, he was eliminated outside the time limit. So I don't think they have got a sprinter left now. Maybe just Sebastian Eno or Tergo, but they've got to work pretty hard to get up here now. Yeah, they're mixing with the best sprinters in the world, and the fastest teams have got control.
Yes, they lost their big sprinter of the first week, Romain Feliu, before we went into the Pyrenees, suffering from a very nasty case of tendonitis to his knee. Once he saw the mountains loom, he said, right, I think I better get this treated before I line myself up for the last part of the season. Now it's down to Bernie Eisel, Tony Martin behind him. Peter Velets is a man riding high in the overall standings, and here he sacrifices himself for Cavendish.
So a kind of reverse loop here as the riders go part way the wrong way round the roundabout here in France, and then they go back the right way. They'll be getting dizzy as they finally run in now towards the end. We're looking for 5 kilometers to go, and he must have just gone under. There he is, 5 kilometers to go. That is for Nicky Terpstra, and they didn't catch him at 5. Computer was wrong as they now continue to race towards the line.
Patacchi had a very good organization around him. The last man to lead out Alessandro Patacchi will be the German, and that, of course, Danilo Hondel. But there's a rider moving on the right from FDJ.
Well, look, we're running very close to the crowd line. This is Philippe Gilbert who's made the move, and that's a typical move. He's an opportunist, and they're coming after him now, and there's a rider from FDJ trying to reach him here. They've just caught him at exactly 3 kilometers to go.
Well, it's a good move on that little incline with 3 kilometers to go. You have to be an extremely special athlete to survive off the front end of a peloton. Gilbert will not be happy, though, Phil, to have somebody sitting there locked onto his slipstream.
Well, I really don't know. I can't read. Could be Jeremy Roy again, who has now lost his leader's jersey, who's come out of the pack flying after him here. But they've gone under the ground, and they'll pop out the other side, and they've got a gap. And this is a gap again, which disturbs the rhythm.
A third rider has come across the gap to join them. They keep looking over their shoulders. You can't look over your shoulders at a time like this. You've just got to buckle under and keep riding and try and survive, because you know the main field is charging at 40 miles an hour.
That is Anthony Roux, I think, looking at his face, who's got in on terms here with Philippe Gilbert. They can't even work with Gilbert. He's just going far too quickly as he tries to take. He wants the points, remember, the green jersey points here. He'd love the stage win. He's had one already, but Anthony Roux is the rider in white. Now we've just got to work out the rider from Movistar who's come up.
Well, there you can see no panic at all on board the HTC High Road Express, but formally they can see Danilo Hondo there on the front coming by. Now the little bit of disorganization.
Now this is how to beat Mark Cavendish as they go into the last 2 kilometers, is to throw individual attacks at the sprinters team and break up the rhythm, and that is working so far. Cavendish, though, watch the green jersey. He's holding position. He is about 7 men down there. He still has control.
Well, they've got now the organisation of Lampre coming to the front end of this pack, and not far back is Gregor Bole. He'll be looking after Alessandro Patacchi. Patacchi's the rider in the pink and blue jersey there with the lime green bike.
And the rush through in the centre in the black is Geraint Thomas trying to pull through Edward Boysenhagen up towards the line. Bit of bumping and barging. There is Geraint in the white sunglasses off to the left here. He's got held to from Rigoberto Urán, the new man in the white jersey on the Team Sky.
Well, Cavendish is boxed in at the moment, but right up there as well in about 5th position is Ben Swift. It looks as if Bosenhagen's going to make the sprint for Ben Swift this afternoon. Once again, it's Geraint Thomas on the front, but now we've got the organisation coming from HTC, but Omega Pharma Lotto moving on the left-hand side, and that's for Greipel.
And Greipel is on the left now. Now the final lead-out is trying to be started here, but very shortly it's got to be Renshaw who takes up the running. Greipel looks as though he's sat up out of this. Now Renshaw goes, and still in his slipstream is the Manx missile. Mark Cavendish is waiting to be launched, and again out of the middle of the field and the debris, he is going to launch an attack. And I'll tell you now, as I look at this, when he goes, there is nobody going to touch him, and he goes as he makes it. That's Daniel Oss who's coming after him in 2nd place, but Renshaw is too fast for Oz. But look at the run of Tyler Farrar. Farrar coming on the right, and Mark Cavendish gets it on the line. He makes it look easy, but boy, again, only just ahead of the field.
Phil,
brilliant enough.
He didn't make it look easy, Phil. The team made it look easy for him, because he cannot win a race without that team around him, setting him up to absolute perfection. That's Daniel Oss over there in the lime green Liquigas Cannondale, but win number 19 for this man. He's unbelievable.
19 stage wins in history, 4 wins in the Tour de France. The yellow jersey is heading home to the UK. He's got a week to defend it, but more big points in the back. 45 for that victory.
Mark Renshaw is the man on the front here, and the man is the right word. Look at the acceleration, dives up through the middle. They've got this off to perfection. Daniel Oss there in 2nd place. Tyler Farrar in the white jersey, blue helmet, coming up very rapidly here on the left-hand side. He's closing all of the time there, as you can see, but on the line, there's no question about it. Cavendish has it, and it looks like Patacchi came up there for 3rd.
Yeah, he got 3rd for sure, and nearer the cam at the back there was Daniel Oss. Then Rojas is the rider in black as they come through, and it looked to me as though that they got Ben Swift up in his best stage finish so far. He was in the mix as well behind those sprinters. There's the congratulations from Matt Goss there, and as Cavendish always does now, he'll go and seek out every member of his team to say thanks very much, guys. The team has won this, not just me. Ahead of Tyler Farrar for Garmin Cervelo. Their dream continues in this race, really. Patacchi getting 3rd, Daniel Oss slipped to 4th, and Rojas it was in 5th. I think Ben Swift was 6th, he was. Gerald Cholik was 7th, Tony Galopin, the last French sprinter there, 8th. Top 10 completed by Sebastien Hinault. Well, that's the result of the day. We'll just take a break, and when we come back, as always, we'll get the interviews we can. We'll also wrap up all the results and overall standings on today's stage of the Tour de France. See you in a moment. Now let's have a look. There we are, down to the podium. Mark Cavendish on the podium. He has now won at Cap Friel, where it all started in this Tour de France for him.